Long before any of this happened, I used to joke that my love life felt like a series of badly edited indie films. Lots of shaky cameras, questionable choices, and no satisfying endings. By the time I hit 26, I was tired of the chaos. I'd already survived one ex who stole half my rent money to buy concert tickets, and another who popped up at my workplace 3 months after the breakup pretending he forgot something at my apartment. After that, I told myself dating was officially dead to me. I buried it, held a quiet funeral, walked away. But loneliness has a tricky way of slipping back into your life. 6 months of therapy made me braver, steadier, more willing to try again. And my roommate, Marissa, who could talk a brick wall into going out for margaritas, kept saying, "Lena, not everyone's a walking red flag. Just find someone with a hobby who doesn't scream danger." Easier said than done. I wasn't looking for anything when I met Elliot on a film camera forum. He posted shots of abandoned train stations bathed in soft blue light, broken windows catching bits of sunset, old factories turned into glowing skeletons. His captions were gentle, thoughtful. He messaged me about my tattoos, telling me one reminded him of a photograph he took in Detroit. We talked cameras, lighting, color tone, places we wanted to explore. He was funny in a quiet way, charming without trying. So when he asked me out, I said yes, even though my stomach tightened the way it always did before a first date. He didn't want coffee or dinner. He wanted to meet at what he called a secret speakeasy under Pier 19, promising it would be the coolest first date ever. Something in his voice note made it sound whimsical, adventurous, and maybe a little reckless. Against my better judgment, I ordered an Uber. That was the beginning of everything. When the Uber dropped me off, I expected neon lights or a hidden door with a clever sign. Instead, I stepped out into a stretch of rusted shipping containers lined up like broken teeth. Rainwater collected in wide puddles reflecting a flickering street lamp that buzzed overhead like an irritated wasp. I tugged my leather jacket tighter around me and texted him, "I'm here. Are you sure this is the right spot?" Before I could hit send, someone stepped out from behind a shipping container. I jumped. "Lena?" he called. It was Elliot, dark curls damp, camera bag slung across his chest, breathing hard like he'd jogged the last block. "Sorry," he said. "I had to make sure the door wasn't being watched." I blinked. "What door? Watched by who?" He didn't answer, just flashed a nervous smile and motioned for me to follow. Every hair on the back of my neck lifted, but curiosity pulled me forward anyway. He led me beneath the pier, the wooden beams creaking overhead as water slapped rhythmically beneath us. We stopped at a metal door tucked between pillars thick with salt and grime. He knocked 3 times. A narrow slit slid open. A pair of eyes stared out. "She coming in too?" a rough voice asked. "Yeah," Elliot said quickly. "She's with me. First time." My heartbeat skidded. The eyes lingered on me a moment too long, then the door opened with a scrape. "Welcome," the voice said. I followed Elliot inside, praying I wasn't making a mistake. I expected a bar, maybe a dim room with jazz music or mismatched furniture. What I walked into felt like something out of a fever dream. The entire place glowed red, crimson light strung across the ceiling like veins. A low bass thumped through the walls. The room was filled with women who looked almost unreal, their skin glossy as lacquer, their eyes wide and unfocused. They moved slowly, gracefully, as if controlled by strings. Every man in the room looked dazed, intoxicated, or simply out of it. "What is this place?" I whispered. "It's cool, right?" Elliot said, smiling like a kid showing off a fort. "No," I said, "it's not." Before I could grab his arm, he vanished into the crowd. I tried to follow, but people drifted between us like fog, and soon I was swallowed by the room. My stomach twisted. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. I started down a hallway lit by pulsing red bulbs. Doors lined each side. Behind them I heard muffled voices, some whispering, some begging. One room emitted a sharp scrape, like metal against tile. Another carried a soft beeping sound, eerily similar to hospital monitors. I turned back, ready to bolt, but then I heard Elliot, a choked, desperate groan. I sprinted toward the sound. I found him in a side room with stainless steel walls and a harsh white lamp overhead. Two masked attendants held him down on a reclining chair, pinning his wrists. A syringe filled with a shimmering red liquid hovered inches above his arm. "Don't let them," Elliot gasped. "Please, don't let—" I froze. Everything inside me surged with adrenaline. "Hey!" I shouted. Both figures turned toward me. One reached for me. My eyes landed on a broken champagne bottle lying on a metal tray. I didn't think. I moved. I grabbed it and slashed the nearest attacker across the shoulder. He screamed, shockingly deep and masculine, stumbling backward and dropping the syringe. The second lunged for me, but I shoved a rolling metal stand into his knees. He crumpled, groaning. "Get up!" I yelled at Elliot. He tried, legs shaking. I threw his arm over my shoulder and dragged him toward the door. "Where's the exit?" I asked. He pointed with trembling fingers. "Back. Hallway. Left. Boiler room." We staggered through twisting corridors, alarms suddenly blaring behind us. Something heavy slammed against a door as voices shouted. "Hurry!" Elliot cried. We burst into a boiler room thick with steam and rust, pipes hissing overhead. A metal door at the far end glowed faintly with outside light. I pushed it open and cold night air hit us like a slap. We ran. Rain soaked our clothes instantly, puddles splashing under our feet as we tore across the pier. Elliot stumbled twice, nearly pulling me down with him. Behind us, distant voices echoed. "This way," I said, guiding him toward the street. "Did you know?" I asked breathlessly. "Did you know what that place was?" "No!" He shook his head, coughing. "I swear, I thought it was just a club. A weird one, but what?" I snapped. "People were tied down, drugged. That wasn't a club." He didn't answer. By the time we reached the main road, he was shaking violently, pale as paper. I called an Uber, hands trembling. When it arrived, the driver looked confused but didn't ask questions. I dropped him off at his apartment. He tried to say something, maybe to explain, maybe to apologize, but I shut the door before he finished. By the time I got home, my hands still hurt from gripping that bottle. I deleted his number, blocked him everywhere, and sat on my bathroom floor until the sun came up, trying to breathe normally again. I never heard from him again. I never went back to Pier 19. I tried once to report it, half practicing what I'd say into my phone, thinking about explaining the doll-eyed women and the metallic smell and the masked attendants, but the words felt impossible, ridiculous, unreal. Who would believe me? Life moved on, slowly, painfully, but it moved. I met someone years later, someone kind, stable, safe. We married. We bought a house with bright windows and warm floors. He knows I don't like basements. He doesn't ask why. But sometimes on the subway, when a woman steps in with too perfect skin and eyes that don't quite focus, my throat tightens. Sometimes when bass thumps from a bar below street level, I feel my heart race, because something is still under Pier 19. Something waiting for the next curious first-timer someone brings in with a confident smile and a promise of adventure. Trust your instincts, even when they feel inconvenient. Curiosity and hope can blur danger, but your gut rarely lies. Stay cautious, stay aware, and never ignore the quiet voice inside you that whispers, "Something is wrong." Long before that night at the harbor, I carried a map of small, careful movements in my head. The route I took from the bus stop so a coworker couldn't follow me, the side door I used after my shift at the diner, the way I walked with my keys between my knuckles. Trauma leaves habits, and they feel like lifelines. So when Miles messaged me after we swiped right and asked if I wanted to meet for dinner, I almost canceled twice. But he was kind in his few texts, patient, a little funny. And when we set the place at a tiny seafood joint by the docks, I figured I could be brave for one evening. I was early and stared at the harbor lights, feeling the cold nibble my fingers through a cheap knit. Miles arrived with a crooked smile and a navy coat, and the informal warmth of him made one corner of my chest unclench. We ordered oysters and fished for small talk like novice anglers. He listened, really listened, and when I told him about the night shift and the coworker who followed me home, he reached across the table and squeezed my hand like it was the most normal human thing to do. "Hey," he said softly, "you're safe here. With me." I believed him until the couple stepped out from behind the brick column by the restaurant door. The woman moved like she owned every inch of the sidewalk. Her husband stayed a step behind her, face shadowed, clutching a heavy-looking camera bag. "Evening, lovebirds," she chimed. "We're doing a little promotion for the restaurant. May I take your picture? For Valentine's? Complimentary, of course." Her voice was syrup-thin, oversweet. She introduced herself as Mrs. Graylin and the man as Mr. Graylin, though the husband didn't speak. He tilted his head toward Miles in a way that made my skin tighten. He stared at Miles's shoes as if memorizing the scuff on the left toe. "No thanks," Miles said. "We're actually heading out." "Oh, but you two look so natural," she insisted. "We can drive you to the studio. Better lighting. It'll just take a moment." I felt the old, taut string inside me snap tight. The thought of getting into a stranger's car after dark felt like stepping across a line I hadn't wanted to cross ever again. I squeezed Miles's arm like a lifeline. "We're good," he said, and for a moment I could see relief wash over his face. We left, and I exhaled like I hadn't known I'd been holding my breath. We tried to laugh it off at a neon-lit mini-golf place a few miles away, where the fluorescent sculptures made our skin look sickly and ridiculous. Miles made me take the first shot and missed on purpose, and I caught the camera peeking behind his hand. He grinned like he hadn't realized anything was wrong, but I was already scanning the corners of the lot for faces. 15 minutes later, while we were arguing playfully over whether the windmill was actually cheating, the Graylins materialized at the counter like bad weather. Mrs. Graylin's cheery voice sliced through the ambient pop music. "Well, what a coincidence," she said, and the way she said it made me cold. "Miles Thompson, isn't it?" Miles blinked. "How do you—" "Oh, we meet so many nice people around here," she said as if that explained everything. "We simply must get a portrait of you two. Proper lighting makes all the difference." Her husband didn't move, but when he looked up, his gaze slipped over Miles's shoes again. That time, he lingered on the exact scuff pattern. I remember my hand going slack around my mini golf putter. "We should go," I whispered. "Now." We left. We walked fast to the car, refusing to let them prod us off our path. I felt the night press close like a thing that listened. I'd thought leaving would be the end of it, a clean exit. I was wrong. On a stretch of road that ran thin between pines and a municipal park called Baxter Woods, snow fell in fat, indifferent flakes. The SUV appeared behind us, as if it had been there all along. I didn't say anything at first, my mouth filling with a cold cocktail of adrenaline and disbelief. When the first metallic bang cut through the night and both rear tires shredded out from under us, everything tuned itself to a point. "We're fine," Miles said, voice steady in a way that made my throat ache. "Stay with me." We tried to stand, check, call. The SUV idled, then eased to a stop a safe distance behind us. A woman's voice, thinly sweet like Mrs. Graylin's, called my name, then Miles's, the sound folded with invitation and craft. "Miles, Jenna, come out. We only want one picture," she called, the syllables soft enough to be a lullaby. We sprinted, boots thudding into snow, and plunged into the trees toward the tangled hush. The pines swallowed our light, the breaths of night closing around our ankles. We hid behind frozen brush until the SUV's engine sighed and moved away. Hours later, when officers found us and took our statements, they cataloged the facts politely. No tire tracks beyond our car. No SUV found. No prints. The fresh snow betrayed nothing. People asked later why we stayed together after that, why Miles and I kept building a life when every instinct told me to vanish. The answer is stupid and lovely. He didn't let me be alone with my fear. We moved cities after a few months, an attempt at a clean slate. We learned to laugh again about small, ridiculous things. He learned how to hold my keys between my knuckles when I walked to the car at night, because he understood that habits are sometimes the only weapons trauma leaves you. But trauma has a way of staying in your pockets like lint. One night, months after we'd moved, I woke because the apartment window reflected the pulse of the streetlight. For a breath, I thought it was just the city. Then I saw her reflection. The high cheekbones, the practiced smile, standing directly behind me in the glass, though my building faced nothing but the alley. I told myself the rational things. A trick of light, someone's face in the dark glass of a passing car. Miles woke and took my hand like a magnet. Grounding. Sure. You sure? He asked. Yes, I said, trying to sound steadier than I felt. I saw her. We called the non-emergency line. The officer who came around wrote a report but said what he always said when certain things wouldn't fit into the neat grid of evidence. Without more, there's not a whole lot we can do. We slept with the curtains closed that night. We never accepted free photos again. If a neighbor suggested a candid for the holiday card, my skin crawled. If someone complimented Miles's coat, I checked his shoe soles like a fool. But the real work wasn't the habits. It was the way we learned to live with the not knowing. The Greylands never resurfaced in any report. The SUV was a ghost in the snow. Maybe they were con artists. Maybe they were someone's idea of a prank that escalated. Maybe they were monsters who liked to memorize shoes. The truth is, sometimes the most frightening thing is the ordinary person who takes a compliment too far and never apologizes. We told the story to friends in clipped sentences, laughing too loudly at the end. It felt safer to trim edges, to make it digestible. But every time a stranger lingered too long at a restaurant door or smiled in a way that matched Mrs. Greyland's, something in me folded up into a small, cautious shape. Miles learned when to hold me tight and when to let me hold myself, teaching me that recovery isn't a straight path but a series of small returns. On the nights I catch my reflection in the glass and think I see her again, I breathe and name it. Memory, not omen. I call Miles to the window, and his presence turns the imagined into the seen. My hand finds his. We close the curtains together and remind each other of the numbers in our phone to call if anything goes wrong. We keep the emergency kit in the trunk and the spare phone charged. We survive the night not because of luck, but because we listened to what my body had learned to hear. Fear taught me roots. Love taught me the courage to walk them differently. Safety is not only the absence of danger, but the presence of boundaries and the people who help us maintain them. Pay attention to the small signals your body gives you. Trust them, and allow caring people to stand with you while you rebuild the map of your life. Long ago, I used to think heartbreak was a thing that happened in cinematic slow motion. Big gestures, dramatic phone calls, a breakup song on the car radio. Real life was messier. It was small betrayals and slow erosion, like a favorite chair losing its stuffing. When my 2.5-year relationship ended, it wasn't explosive. It unraveled. We stopped finishing each other's sentences and started leaving dishes in the sink like ransom notes. What I missed most, weirdly, wasn't him. It was the ritual. Late-night pool and dim dive bars, the clack of balls, the ridiculous trash talk, the absurd comfort of knowing whose elbow would be where at the bar. After the breakup, I realized I had been mourning the routine more than the person. For weeks, I did the sensible things, therapy, friends, long runs that ended at coffee shops, but routines rooted deep. One Wednesday, on a night when the cold made the city sound smaller and my apartment felt too quiet, I gave the dating apps another try because ritual is contagious. I matched with Colton because he wrote something stupid and honest in his profile. I love bars that smell like old wood and bad decisions. It read like an invitation to a place I already knew. He suggested the Rusted Q. I knew the place. I knew the slight dip in the floor, how the regulars tipped their heads at the owner, and where the pool lights hummed just loud enough to drown out the jukebox. I told myself this would be harmless, a return to a small, known world. We met under the bar's flickering sign. He was 20-something in a way that tried to be relaxed. Jeans, a wool cap, a nervous smile that kept riding up like it was on a leash. "Sorry I'm late," he said, winded, glancing at the door like he expected someone to barge in. "Traffic, Uber got weird." "It's fine," I said. I meant it. The bar smelled like spilled beer and fried food and memories that weren't mine anymore. He bought a drink, cheap whiskey, and suggested a game. He racked wrong, which is a minor crime in my book. I laughed it off when the cue ball shot rogue after his careless break. He told stories about quitting college, getting fired from some warehouse job, and, with a grin that looked more like a confession, how he'd been learning to pick locks just for fun. "Seriously?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," he shrugged. "It's a hobby, like photography or pool." It sounded harmless and then not harmless. My gut tightened a little, like it does when you're about to step off a curb and there's a taxi. I let it ride. We drank. He got talkative. He leaned in closer with each round, inching into my personal space like a tide. "Want to head back to my place? It's like a 3-minute walk," he said at one point, voice dropping into a tone that meant, "Trust me." "Only if we survive a second date first," I joked. He didn't laugh. His face went flat. His hand tightened on the rail. "So you wasted my money? You think you're too good for me?" He hissed, then yanked my purse off the chair and stormed toward the exit. The bar regulars peeled off their stools like barnacles. 2 old men intercepted him outside, their voices sharp as a referee's whistle. "Put that down, kid," one barked. I booked an Uber shaking, my heart ping-ponging between relief and the odd humiliation of being watched while leaving. The driver took my silent radio to the apartment. I slept a little in the ride and woke with a dry throat. I emptied my purse on the kitchen counter like I always do when I get home. Keys, wallet, gum, receipts. Something small rolled across the formica and pinged against the sink. An AirTag. My mouth went dry in a way my coffee hadn't fixed. I don't own one. I smashed it with a hammer in the sink until the plastic cracked like an animal underfoot. Then I tried to breathe. Around 1:30 a.m., I went outside to take out the trash and froze at the sight of a dented beige Lincoln idling like an ugly sentinel down the block. It crept past my house, slowed, and happened again. On the 4th lap, it stopped in front of my driveway. Under the streetlight, I saw him, Colton, holding something reflective across his lap. A knife. Simple kitchen blade, maybe, but in that moment, the world rearranged into predator and prey. I killed the lights, slid behind the curtains, and folded into myself like a paper crane. The car idled for a long time, then drove off like nothing had happened. I stayed under that window long after the smell of his cologne had faded from the air. The next morning, I told my parents. They told me to call the police if he returned. I told them I would, and then I realized something. The police would need proof. I had a smashed AirTag in a Ziploc bag and a story that sounded like something people say when they want to be dramatic. What if we made it into a problem and no one cared? So I did the sensible things I could. Changed my locks, updated my phone settings, checked the Find My app until the blue dot felt like a soft bruise. I told friends, changed my routes to work, bought a motion-activated light for the porch. I avoided the bar where the thing started because the familiarity now tasted of edges. Sleep betrayed me for a week. I'd jerk awake at phantom footsteps, glance at my dark living room, and imagine eyes pasted to the other side of glass. I thought a lot about permission, the way we offer it in small moments, and how quickly it can be taken away. People tell you not to be paranoid. They mean well. Paranoia is a luxury they hope you won't need. But that tiny tracker in my purse had proven something I couldn't unsee. Intimacy can be engineered. Colton never came back, at least not that I saw. Maybe he moved on to someone else's bar where their rituals looked more like an open invitation. Maybe the Lincoln was the sort of vehicle that disappears into the city's tired skin and never gets traced. I filed nothing, mostly because I didn't want to spend my days at a police station telling a story that sounded like a bad episode of a true crime podcast. Instead, I learned other ways to fight back. I carried my keys between my fingers like a small weapon. I started leaving a light on in the hall at night. I told my boss to let me leave late without questions. I trusted fewer profiles, asked more questions, and never ever accepted being rushed into proximity. Months later, the old urge came back, an ache for the clack of pool balls, the comfort of a routine where every person had a place. I went back to the rusted queue one evening with a friend, and the jukebox was the same, the regulars older and kinder. I sat at the bar and let someone else order my drink. I played a single game that felt ordinary, and then walked home with the lights on my street guiding me like little beacons. I still flinch when my phone buzzes unexpectedly. I still check my bag twice before I sit. But I also learned that rituals can be rebuilt, slowly, deliberately. The difference is this. Now I respect the pause. I ask for it and expect it. If someone's voice tightens, I leave. If someone oversteps, even subtly, I listen to the small voice in my chest that says, no. Trust the small alarms inside you. Red flags aren't theatrical. They're practical. Protect your patterns and tell someone when something feels off. Privacy is no one's obligation but your own. Learn what you can about your devices, share your location selectively, and never underestimate the power of walking away. Long before the gallery lights and the viral comments, my life was a crooked trail of temporary things. My parents were wanderers by temperament, packed and gone before the dust settled on anything stable, so I learned to treat places like props, useful for a while, then folded away. That nomadic childhood left me with habits that look like art. I paint what unsettles me. Shadowed figures half-formed, animals with melting eyes, portraits that drip at the edges. The paintings are honest in ways I am not. They keep the chaos pressed onto canvas where I can stare at it and make rules about it. The email from Evan arrived like most of the commission requests did, short, polite, and oddly flattering. He paid more than I asked for a simple sketch, a gesture that should have made me suspicious, and instead made me blink. His messages were careful, the kind of attention that reads like a book someone calls a favorite and then quotes from memory. He knew obscure artists I admired, commented on my writing about mental health with the exact tenderness I'd learned to expect from strangers online. I told myself I was being paranoid when I read a pattern where there was none. We agreed on coffee in the art district. He was late by 5 minutes, and apologetic when he arrived, carrying a metal case under his arm like some unexpected prop. He spoke softly, with a voice that sank into sentences, instead of pushing them away. "Your work has teeth," he said, looking at my hands the way collectors look at the underside of frames. "It's honest." I laughed too quickly. "Teeth are hard to feed," I said. He smiled like he understood the joke and then, oddly, like he approved of the hunger. We wandered into an antique shop he liked. It smelled like fogged glass and oil, like things that had been handled but never lived in the light. He moved through the stacks gently, stopping to hold small objects with reverence. I relaxed until he led me to a back shelf and then pulled down a jar with a preserved gazelle skull suspended in clear fluid. It glowed like a pale moon in the dim light. "Oh," I said, stepping back. I could feel the old habit of placation rise in me, nod, smile, be small. He apologized immediately, too swiftly. "Sorry, I know that's a lot." He explained too quickly about anatomy and line and the way decay shows structure. The conversation drifted from scientific awe to something else when he showed me a second jar hidden in a storage corridor. This one held a primate skull, modified with tiny metal screws. His tone shifted. A pride creased his voice. "Bones are honest," he said. "But imagine a masterpiece, human form studied, reconstructed. I've been posting, trying to find donors." I felt my stomach drop in a way that was cartoonish and absolute. He met my silence with a soothing word that fell like syrup. I don't want to scare you. I left the shop pretending to need air. My fingers trembled as I texted a friend my location. He followed me outside, footsteps measured. He apologized again softly, like a metronome. He suggested continuing the date at his studio to talk art. The offer landed with all the wrong weight. No, I said. My voice was flat and honest for the first time. I need to go. He tried to make a joke. It flopped into the night. I ran toward the street, toward people, lights, the possibility of being swallowed by a crowd. Later, sitting in my tiny kitchen with the kettle humming, I deleted his number and erased the messages. I told myself the rational things. He's a weirdo, not a criminal. Bizarre interest in bones does not equal threat, but a part of me kept replaying his proud small grin over that primate skull and the way his eyes shone at the word masterpiece. Weeks later, there was a jar at my apartment door. Someone had left it gently, like an offering. I found it at noon, sun slicing the hallway between mailboxes. The jar contained a small, fake skull, cleverly made, disturbingly realistic with the words, "You inspire me, Lana," written in looping black ink. There were no fingerprints, no cameras that caught whoever left it, no suspect list that fit into a neat box for the police to check. I took the jar inside and sat with it on the table until the sun slid away and the room felt smaller. I called friends, then filed a report, then deleted a host of location tags on social platforms, and scrubbed anything that could be used to triangulate me. I changed my commute slightly. I unplugged my studio camera and soldered the wires shut. Better to be blind than to welcome another echo into my life. But the thing that worried me most wasn't the material of the skull. It was the intimacy of the note and assertion that someone had watched enough to feel inspired. Months passed. I learned to sleep with my phone on the nightstand and the door chain engaged. I learned to let a friend know when I was meeting someone, not because I wanted rescuing, but because the habit of survival worked much better with witnesses. Sometimes I wonder if Evan sent the jar. I have no proof. Maybe he moved on to someone else. Maybe it was an admirer with a different face. Maybe the jar was the work of a prank or a deeply disturbed person I will never meet. My art shifted after that. The mouths in my portraits sealed tighter. Eyes became mirrors instead of windows. People told me the work grew more honest, more urgent. They said I'd found my voice. I think I found a boundary that I finally let stand up straight. I stopped saying yes to uncomfortable things because I could, and I started saying no when the tiny hairs on my neck rose. It felt less heroic and more practical, a map redrawn. When I shop now, I still sometimes glance at metal cases. I still flinch at the sight of jars in dim stores, but I also carry my own small acts of quiet rebellion. I learned locks. I set timers with friends when I'm on a date. I save exact screenshots of any message that creeps me out. The point of all of it isn't to live in constant vigilance, but to make space for art and life to continue without erasing me. Trust the steady warnings your body gives you. Precaution is not cowardice, but care. And the boundaries you enforce are small acts of survival that protect the life you are building. I left because love felt less like a shelter and more like a set of bars. For months he tracked me through my own life, comments parsed into accusations, late-night messages that read like audits, jealous tirades thinly disguised as concern. When I packed the last of my things and closed the door on the one bedroom that had become a courtroom, I thought leaving would be the end of it. It wasn't. The paranoia came with me. The reflex to double lock, the habit of checking behind the shower curtain, the way my hand curled around my keys like a talon. I moved to Denver because I needed altitude between myself and him, something that made me breathe easier. I thought a new city meant a new script. I was wrong about a lot of things. The dating app felt like a dare I gave myself. My friends said it would be good practice, low stakes, just people, but practice doesn't erase the muscle memory of being monitored. I made a profile that was smaller than my life. A cropped photo, a line about coffee and long hikes. I swiped because silence pressed on me. Someone liked me within an hour. Logan, with his clean hair and rehearsed smile. He messaged like a man who took notes on charm. "Hey, I live just across the courtyard," he said. "Small world, right?" The idea of proximity made me relax. Familiar building, public walkway, quick exit. We agreed to meet at the fire pit that evening, a neutral place with witnesses. He arrived early, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, scanning the small circle of benches as if rehearsing a scene. He complimented me 5 times before the first marshmallow on the skewer had a chance to melt. "You look great tonight. Your jacket amazing. You have a really nice laugh." he said, slow and precise. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. That's a lot of compliments for an icebreaker. He smiled, eyes steady. I just wanted you to know I noticed things. He noticed things I didn't tell him. He remembered offhand comments like they were facts and brought them up like evidence. When I said I worked early, he said, I thought you said you were free tomorrow, and his voice pinched in a way that made my throat clench. He asked too many questions about who I was friends with in the complex. He said, casually, oh, your neighbor with the rescue dog? I pass her sometimes. The small talk turned prickly fast. When I pushed for normal topics, his jokes landed flat. When I tried to leave early, he looked wounded in a way that felt manufactured. After I got home, I blocked his number. I told myself that was that. At midnight, there was pounding on my door. A voice, masculine and urgent, shouted my name with an intimacy that turned my blood cold. Sienna, we need to talk. You lied to me. I pressed myself behind the couch and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. My voice was small but clear. There's a man at my door. He says he knows me. I don't know him. The police arrived in lull between 1 and 2 in the morning time. The guy at my door insisted he lived in my building, in my girlfriend's unit. He said things that framed me as the confused one, the one who'd made a mistake. I told the officers I had just met him an hour before and that he had not lived in 4B. They took his ID, radioed management, and radioed back no one by that name had ever lived here. He left with the officers, mouth pressed into a thin line, eyes flaring once when he passed me. I tried to feel relieved. Instead, my apartment felt like a stage where the scene could resume at any moment. Management locked down the courtyard for a day, and I slept with all lights on, every creak a possible prelude. Even with a police report filed and his number dead, the small invasions continued. A flyer tacked to a mailbox with my name misspelled. A shadow that paused at the far edge of the courtyard before melting into night. The app notifications that I hadn't asked for. A new account with no photos that mirrored his phrasing. I deleted the apps for good this time. The weeks that followed were a study in rebuilding margins. I changed my routines. Different coffee shop, different route to work. I told my coworkers what happened, and the kindness from humans who weren't monitors felt like a salve. But fear is sticky. I flinched when a jogger slowed near me. I checked locks 3 times. When the complex installed a new camera by the courtyard, I watched the footage like proof that the world could be made to behave. Then, one evening, I heard footsteps in the courtyard again. Slow, patient. I froze on my balcony, heart in my throat, watching a shadow move beneath the sodium light. The camera feed showed no face, only a silhouette that seemed to linger as if waiting for permission. I called the non-emergency line, then sat with the phone on my lap for an hour, listening to my own uneven breath. I learned to speak my fear aloud. I told the building manager every oddity, and he started to walk his rounds more honestly. I told my sister, the one who could hear panic and translate it into action. She came and stayed a night, bringing with her an energy that made the apartment feel less like a place to hide and more like a place to live. Healing didn't come in a day or a tidy arc. It came in small agreements with myself. I would not be defined by how someone else chose to behave toward me. I started going to a local yoga class where people nodded kindly in that neighborly way Denver does. I let a few new apps sit on my phone, closed and unchecked. I dated slowly, coffee, broad daylight, public transit meetings, and with friends on standby. I told people where I was going, who I was with, and I asked for the right to step away if anything felt off. One night, months later, I stood at the fire pit again, not to meet anyone but because the courtyard light felt like a map of how far I'd walked. A neighbor waved, a child called someone's name, the city hummed. I felt my palms unclench around my keys. I wasn't done with my past. It would probably crop up in dreams or in the reflex to double-check the locks. But the panic no longer claimed me. I never saw Logan again. Maybe he moved on to someone else. Maybe he never came back. That ambiguity is its own kind of terror, but it's also a reminder. I was not given closure by him, only the chance to build my own. Trust your instincts and reclaim your boundaries. Safety is not paranoia when it is practiced, and healing is the steady work of rebuilding trust in yourself and in the world on terms that you set. I grew up near the coast where cold water taught me respect before I learned to trust strangers. The winter I was 17, A school trip meant for birdwatching turned into a lesson on how quickly fear can erase technique. We'd been sledding on a frozen river when the ice buckled under a group of us. For a long time afterward, I could only picture that cracking sound, a sound that feels like your chest folding inward. I clawed out of that water, coughing salt and fear, and the memory wired itself into my reflexes. Years later, when someone asked why I avoided late nights and unfamiliar paths, I would tell them about the ice and watch their faces soften. People who haven't almost died think empathy will fix trauma. It didn't. It made me careful. It made me run. I met Noah online because the world insists on connecting people through screens. His profile was full of grainy landscapes and wide horizons, a photographer traveling through Iceland with a soft smile and sharper eyes. He messaged me about whales and sonar clicks, things I studied and loved. Our conversation felt easy, factual, curious, threaded with jokes about the worst coffee in Reykjavik. When he suggested meeting at a cafe near the old harbor, it sounded like a safe first step. Public place, lots of people, light until late. That's the only way, I agreed. He arrived with a camera bag slung over his shoulder and those gloves on, pale leather that never came off. I always wear gloves, he said, shrugging, the sort of explanation that is also a little a question. I told myself Iceland was cold and that was enough reason. We talked about my research on whale migration and the study I'd been writing. He listened like a person who recorded rather than argued. I liked that until the cafe staff announced a sudden closure because of a storm blowing in faster than expected. Want to walk to a nearby frozen lake? The silhouettes against snow would be perfect, he said, voice low and steady. That sentence should have been the alarm bell, rhythmic and loud. Instead, I thought of the safety of a short walk, of the street lamps, of the well-trodden path I'd taken home 100 times. Guilt nudged me, the guilt left over from the ice when I had survived and others had not, and I told myself I could handle a little risk. We walked. The wind pushed snow across the street in thin sheets. Noah talked about composition and light. His words were precise, as if he built pictures in his mouth before releasing them. I noticed he kept checking behind us, not the way people glance back to see if they forgot a bag, but the way someone keeps looking for a shape that repeats in their life. There was a van parked by the lake when we arrived, running with no one visible in the driver's seat. He said it was normal for fishermen to leave engines idling in storms. I should have left then. When he finally peeled off his gloves, I saw the scratches on his hands, pale lines that rose like old scars. He caught me staring and smoothed his fingers reflexively. It's nothing, he said too quickly. Climbed some rocks last week. His voice had a texture that stopped me from asking more. He wanted a silhouette of me against the lake. He wanted me to stand on the ice, just far enough from shore to make a perfect frame. When he described it, his tone changed like a lens focusing, flat, clinical. It'll be beautiful, he said. You'd fit the series on isolation I'm working on. Then another man emerged from the van, heavy coat, camera around his neck, like a second note in a carefully practiced duet. Noah introduced him as Lucas and said he'd help with lighting. Lucas didn't smile. He didn't need to. He moved slow and precise like someone who had done things quietly before. My heart beat a warning I couldn't afford to ignore. The river inside me that had learned to sense thin ice kept murmuring in my bones. I turned and ran. My feet slid. Snow burned like ice on my palms. The world narrowed to breath and pain, and the simple animal desire to be somewhere safe. Noah shouted for me to stop. Talia, wait! You don't understand. His voice curdled into the wind. Lucas walked behind him, far enough to be a presence but not a rescue. I found a fishing shed and clambered inside, pressing myself into the dark with old nets and the smell of rot and diesel. I fumbled my phone and sent a message to my roommate. Here, by the frozen lake, in the small shed near the southern bank. Please come. It was barely signal, but it was enough to be a string into the world. Outside, I heard them talking in low voices. We're losing light, Noah whispered. She fits the criteria. She's perfect. Too loud. Too panicked, Lucas replied. Next time, choose quieter. Their words were the coldest thing I had felt since nearly drowning. They left. The van started and disappeared into the white blur. I stayed in the shed until my roommate's boots thudded behind the door, and then the flood of relief dismantled itself into shaking and anger and a dozen small apologies I owed myself. The police were kind, in that neutral way. Institutions are professional, slightly distant. They checked the van's tire marks and found nothing else. Noah's profile vanished from the apps within hours. The photos that had once built a face for him were gone. Pixel dust in the cloud. Lucas couldn't be traced. The report turned into an investigation file with a case number I knew would become a drawer somewhere in a town hall. I wanted the kind of justice that arrives physical and visceral. But what the system gave me was process and promises. After that night, emails came. Subject lines, still searching for the right subject. The body contained blank, white images, nothing but whiteness like a closed eye. At first I thought it was a glitch, a weird spam campaign. Then the timing started to hurt. An email after I rescheduled a field trip. An email after I posted a new photo of a research note. Anonymous senders with empty pictures, like a photograph without the person. A negative where the subject had been erased. I stopped trusting the ordinary safety of daylight. I checked my phone constantly. Every notification, a hand reaching out. Friends suggested I change my habits, different routes, smaller social media footprints. I did it like someone rearranging furniture after a break-in. Practical, necessary, and shaped by the memory of wrongness. Time didn't soothe everything. It rearranged me, taught me to carry a small map of exits, and to always tell someone where I was going. I let go of any idea that closure would be a neat page in a book. Some things are left open, raw. I learned to make smaller bargains. Coffee dates at noon, meeting in places where mothers and children and dog walkers move in small constellations. I trusted people again in degrees, not fully. I went back to the harbor once, months later, to sit in that same cafe and watch the sea under benign skies. I watched other people laugh, wave, zip their coats against wind that now felt like wind and not threat. My hands stopped curling into defensive fists when someone approached. A kindness like that doesn't erase trauma. It gathers it into the body in less painful ways. The emails continued. Rarely. A blank white visiting my inbox like a reminder. I saved them. Oddly. As proof that fear had a shape. I did not let the fear decide how I would live. I let it teach me. I took small risks and recorded them like field notes. Returned to the pier. Taught a seminar. Met a colleague for dinner. Not every silence is the hold of danger. Not every van is waiting. My ice-stiff reflexes became part of my toolkit, not my jailer. Trauma teaches survival, not surrender. Trust your instincts, but don't let fear alone write the map of your life. Use it to learn safe routes, ask for help, keep witnesses, and let small, careful steps rebuild the world around you. I used to think solitude and silence were the same thing. After 3 years of freelancing from my one-bedroom manuscripts stacked like sleepy towers, a kettle that knew my schedule, I learned they were not. Silence can be companionable. Solitude can be chosen. But the pandemic rewired my boundaries. Months of video calls and grocery runs and empty apartment evenings left me missing the accidental human contact that used to punctuate life. The barista, who remembered my order. A neighbor's laugh through thin walls. When vaccines finally loosened the world, I told myself dating was not about finding a person to finish my sentences. It was about letting small conversations back in. That's how I found myself agreeing to meet Casey. Not for romance, just to hear another real voice in the same air. Casey's profile felt like a mid-level ad for reliability, warm photos, a hiking snapshot with tired mud at the hem, a bio that read, bad at cooking, great at washing dishes. It made me smile, and we texted like normal adults for 2 days. Recipes we failed at, the best guilty pleasure TV shows, the worst date stories. Nothing flirtatious, nothing heavy. When he suggested a private restaurant across town for dinner, I declined. The world still felt fragile, and my comfort zone was Laurel Park. Dog walkers, joggers, light until dusk. He agreed fast, almost eagerly. And that slight rush in his messages was the first thing I told myself would be fine to ignore. I arrived on time and sat under the maple tree where the park bench lined up with the path. I scrolled through my phone to kill nerves and watched parents with strollers pass like a comforting parade. Minutes trickled by. 20, 40. No Casey, no text. I told myself people are late. The city is chaotic. He could have been held up. I tried to unwind. I read a paragraph of an article, thumbed through a manuscript. The sky began to soften, toward dusk. A guy in a dark hoodie showed up near the playground, pretending to check his phone while glancing my way more than seemed casual. He paced, paused, mirrored my movements when I shifted benches. When I moved closer to the lot to wait under a streetlight that seemed brighter, he matched my pace, a few yards back. My skin tightened like a wire. I told myself again I was being silly. The pandemic had kept people indoors, and maybe he was lonely too. I texted Casey, "I'm here under the maple." He didn't reply. The hoodie man moved with a slow, patient rhythm that made me uncomfortable. When I finally stood, intending to leave and call it a wash, the footsteps behind me turned into a run. Panic is a precise sensation. The sudden acceleration of breath. The animal need to move. I fumbled for my keys with shaking hands, the brass cool and then suddenly hot in my grip, and dove into my car. I slammed the lock and felt the window rattle under 2 flat palms. He pressed his hands hard, shouting through glass I couldn't parse. The parking lot blurred, my tires bit against gravel, and my heart rattled like loose change. I peeled out, nearly clipping a trash bin in the hurry of wanting a place with more people. Back at home, the adrenaline trickled into humiliation. How had I let this get so close? I replayed the scene like someone editing a clip, searching for the frame I missed. I tried to contact Casey again. His profile had gone blank, no photos, no bio, not even a trace of his messages anymore. It was as if he had been a ghost who hovered briefly enough to be noticed and then dissolved. I reported the incident to the park patrol and filed a complaint through the dating app, blocking anything that resembled his account. A friend asked if I was okay. She used a gentleness that felt like a bandage. "Emily, you did the right thing. You left. You were safe." Logic and fear spoke different languages. The fear had a louder voice in the dark. I stayed inside for 3 days, turning lights on and off like a person testing a bridge before crossing. I took calls from my sister with the polite distance of someone who knows to let you breathe. I made coffee and put on music loud enough to drown out the memory of hands on glass. Gradually, I gave myself tiny tasks to prove to myself the world remained navigable. I opened the blinds in the morning and made a list of errands that involved daylight. I walked to the bakery at noon and returned with a warm croissant and a shaky sense of accomplishment. I drove past Laurel Park slowly one afternoon just to see the maple tree from the safety of my car. The bench where I had waited seemed ordinary, populated by a woman with a stroller and a man tying his shoe. No hoodie figures waited in the playground. Still, the breath held in my chest did not fully let go. I worried about the possibility that Casey had not been a benign ghost but a deliberate lure for someone else. The idea that a profile could be a pretext, a bait, a way to watch a person move through a city, is the filth of modern dating. It's an ugly truth that sometimes the line between curiosity and predation is thinner than we want to believe. I changed routines, different walking times, different paths, a slightly bulging key in my fist as I moved from my car to the door. Each change was a stitch. Time did what time does. It diffused intensity but didn't erase memory. A month later, I walked to the park at mid-afternoon, sat on another bench with a coffee, and let the sun warm my face. A toddler trailed bubbles. An old couple fed pigeons. I stayed an hour. I left without drama. The maple still stood. The playground still creaked. When I passed the parking lot where the man had hit my window, my steps did not quicken the way they had before. They were steady enough that I noticed small things, the way sunlight caught dust motes, how a pigeon hopped to the beat of its own hunger. Those details were ordinary and restorative. I don't know if Casey was ever real. People vanish off apps for a dozen non-threatening reasons, and sometimes that's what happened. But the possibility that the hoodie man had intended me as a practice run, a person to study, to learn how I moved, how I fled, has lodged in me like a chipped tooth. It aches sometimes, sudden and sharp. Mostly, though, it's a dull memory that guides decisions. I refuse to let it become a script for my life. Instead, it's a line in an ever-growing list of ways I protect myself. Tell someone where I'm going, choose public places, park in well-lit lots, keep the car locked until I'm inside. These aren't dramatic rules, they're small steadies. I still use dating apps, but differently. I vet accounts. I ask questions that feel casual but are checks in practice. I arrange to meet in pairs, public, visible, with friends nearby. I don't want fear to write the outline of my days. But I also don't want the world to convince me danger isn't real. The two truths can coexist. Life is full of good coffee and small talk, And life also demands that we be practical about our safety. Trust your instincts and prepare. Taking precautions isn't paranoia, it's self-respect. Protecting yourself, setting boundaries, choosing public spaces, telling someone where you'll be lets you participate in the world without surrendering your safety. I grew up learning that love could leave splinters. My parents' marriage cracked in slow motion, late-night arguments muffled through walls, cold silences at breakfast, my mother's nervous glances that never landed long on my father's face. When the divorce finally came, I wasn't surprised. I was relieved. But something in me shifted permanently. I learned to brace myself whenever someone used the word times forever, asterisk. I learned that trust felt like stepping onto ice I wasn't sure could hold me. By the time I was 30, dating felt like a language I had forgotten how to speak. Friends encouraged me gently, telling me I deserved connection, that not everyone carried storms behind their smiles. I agreed in theory. In practice, I avoided dating apps like they were cliffs. Then came Ronan. He added me on a social site, first a musician with soft brown eyes, dimples, and a self-deprecating humor that made it easy to let my guard down. He messaged me about my book reviews, asked for album recommendations, and never pushed for anything too personal. It felt safe, the way quiet rain feels safe, steady, simple, familiar. After a week of talking, he suggested meeting in person. Retro diner near Piccadilly, he wrote. Milkshakes on me. And terrible jukebox music. I said yes before I could rehearse excuses. It felt like progress. I arrived early, trying to calm the butterflies that had become tiny earthquakes in my chest. The chrome sign above the diner glowed warm against the early evening sky. People moved in clusters around the station, tourists, commuters, couples with linked arms. I felt anonymous in the best way. Then my phone buzzed. Running late. Actually, want to meet me by the old railway footbridge? Best skyline view in the city. Promise it's worth it. I stared at the message. The footbridge wasn't far, but it was an abandoned structure I'd only ever passed during the day. My instinct pulsed. No, but the familiar voice in my head, the one shaped by childhood uncertainty, whispered, "Don't be difficult. Don't be paranoid. Be fun for once." So I walked. The path grew quieter the farther I went. Fewer streetlights, more graffiti, broken fence panels leaning crookedly. A metallic smell, rust, hung in the air. I kept telling myself it was fine, just a detour. That's when I noticed the older man behind me, limping slightly, worn-out satchel hanging at his hip. He wasn't close enough to touch me, but close enough to mirror my steps. When I sped up, he did too. When I slowed, so did he. My mouth went dry. I messaged Ronan, asterisk, almost there. Are you? Asterisk. No reply. My heart thudded harder with each step. The bridge loomed ahead, tall metal beams, chipped paint, a long walkway above the tracks below. And there was Ronan. He waved, too eagerly, then pulled me into a hug that lingered too long. His breath trembled against my neck. Finally, he whispered. I stepped back. His eyes were jittery, scanning the edges of the bridge like he expected someone to appear. He looked nothing like the relaxed man from our chats. His shoulders were tight, his smile forced. Before I could ask anything, the older man reached us, panting softly. "Miss, please don't go with him," he said. "You need to leave." Ronan snapped instantly. "Ignore him. He's a crazy drunk. He hangs around here bothering women." The older man shook his head, planting his cane firmly. "He's lying. He's done this before. Girls, same spot, same messages. Don't let him walk you any farther." My stomach flipped violently. Ronan grabbed my wrist. "Elise, he's dangerous. Don't listen," the old man yelled. "He's the one you should be afraid of. He brings women here. He records them. Shut up," Ronan roared, stepping toward him. I stumbled backward, pulse pounding in my ears. Both men were shouting now, each accusing the other of being the threat. My mind raced. Ronan's too tight hug, his jittery glances, the sudden change of meeting spot. His silence when I texted. My instincts screamed louder than my memories. "Let go," I said, ripping my wrist from his grip. I turned and ran down the ramp. Behind me, metal clanged, something dropped. A grunt, a yell, then a scuffling sound that made my blood go cold. I didn't wait to see who was winning, who was falling, who was lying. My feet hit the pavement hard. I made it to a cafe with lights glowing warm in the windows. A barista saw my shaking hands immediately. "Are you okay?" she asked. already reaching for her phone. "Please call the police," I managed. "Sit down," she said firmly. "You're safe here." Police found both men minutes later, bruised, bleeding, breathless. Ronan tried telling officers the older man had attacked him, unprovoked. The older man claimed the opposite. I stayed silent except for the details I knew. Messages, meeting place change, the wrist grab, the way he kept scanning the bridge like waiting for something. The truth surfaced slowly, piece by horrifying piece. The older man Arthur wasn't drunk, homeless, or unstable. He'd once been lured to that same footbridge by Ronan, under the pretense of buying old vinyl records. Ronan had claimed he wanted a quick photo shoot in exchange for cash. Arthur, being kind and curious, went. Up there, he'd found a hidden phone recording setup tucked behind a metal beam. Ronan became agitated when Arthur questioned it. Arthur barely escaped, but the experience fractured something in him. He spent months walking the area, trying to warn people. Most ignored him, others avoided him. Ronan's backpack contained rope, duct tape, and a knife with electrical tape wrapped around the handle for grip. When police questioned him, he claimed he was filming urban survival content and needed props. His story fell apart under scrutiny. His online profiles were inconsistent, with gaps and lies that made my skin crawl months later just remembering. He was arrested, charged, investigated further. Arthur was treated for a cracked rib and released after giving a statement. When he saw me afterward, he said, "You listened. Nobody else did. You saved yourself." I hugged him. The weeks that followed were a blur of apartment listings, job applications, and phone calls to friends who tried their best to sound calm even when their voices shook with what they didn't say aloud. I moved to a brighter neighborhood with more foot traffic. I switched jobs for one closer to home. I started therapy after waking up twice in a row from dreams of the bridge, hearing metal clatter behind me. Evening walks disappeared from my routine. I missed them sometimes, the quiet rhythm of my steps soothing my thoughts. But safety mattered more. Months later, something new began. Friend requests from accounts created days earlier, each with a profile picture taken from the same abandoned footbridge. Different angles, different times of day, but unmistakably, that place. No messages, just requests. I blocked every account, reported some, screenshotted others. I do not know if Ronan is sending them or if someone else found his old camera stash, but each time I see that bridge in a tiny square on my screen, a cold wave rolls down my spine. Still, I'm not the same woman who walked toward that place ignoring her instincts. I'm louder now, sharper, less apologetic. When something feels wrong, I listen. Instincts are survival tools, not inconveniences. Trust the voice that warns you, even when someone else tries to make you feel dramatic, rude, or paranoid. Your safety is worth more than anyone's approval. I've been traveling for work for almost a decade, but March of 2021 was different. The pandemic had slowed everything down, made airports quieter, streets emptier, and hotel lobbies echo with their own loneliness. My name's Ryan Pierce, 38 business consultant, divorced for 3 years, and terrible at cooking anything that doesn't come in a paper bag. That month, my company sent me to Seattle to help a small logistics startup recover after the lockdown slump. The job wasn't bad. The people were fine. But every night when I came back to my room 407 at the Silverline Suites, I felt that familiar weight of silence press in. The kind of silence that hums behind your ears until you can't ignore it anymore. My life had become a series of identical hotel rooms. The faint detergent smell, the scratchy carpet, the small desk that somehow always wobbled. I ate alone, worked alone, and scrolled through news headlines that made the world feel like a movie I wasn't part of. That night it was drizzling outside, Seattle-style rain. Steady, misty, like the sky couldn't decide whether to cry or sigh. I sat by the window, watched the city lights bounce off wet asphalt, and told myself I wasn't lonely. But loneliness has a way of dressing up like calm until you look it in the eye. On impulse, I downloaded Tinder. I hadn't used it in months. Half my matches were probably inactive and the rest were bots. But then I saw her. Lena Marlowe. 29, brown hair, hazel eyes, a grin that looked like it belonged to someone who knew how to have fun. Her bio said, "I make terrible coffee but great company." I swiped right. We matched instantly. We started talking. The conversation felt easy, almost too easy. She joked about Seattle weather. I teased her about her coffee skills. She said she lived a few blocks away, that she was tired of being cooped up, and asked if I wanted to split a bottle of wine and complain about 2021 together. I hesitated. I wasn't the kind of guy to invite strangers into hotel rooms, but she sent a selfie holding a bottle of Merlot, her hair damp, a teasing caption, "Relax, I don't bite." I laughed, told her, "Fine, one glass." By 10 o'clock I'd straightened my shirt, shoved my laundry bag under the bed, and tried not to feel stupid for caring how I looked. The knock came right on time. Soft, quick, like someone testing the sound before committing. When I opened the door, there she was, drenched from the rain, brown hair sticking to her cheek, eyes bright like headlights in fog. "Hi," she said with a shy smile. "God, Seattle weather." "Yeah," I said, stepping aside. "It's basically atmospheric soup." She laughed, a real one, and stepped in. For a moment it felt good, normal, like maybe the night wasn't another repeat of the last 100. But then I saw it. A faint metallic glint inside her half-open bag. A flash, maybe a keychain, maybe something else. I told myself it was nothing, but my stomach didn't believe it. Lena put the wine bottle on the table and started looking around like she was cataloging the room. Her jacket dripped a little on the carpet. "Nice place," she said. "You travel a lot?" "Too much," I admitted. "Kind of used to being alone." She smiled, but something about it felt rehearsed. "That makes you easy to talk to," she said, turning slightly to check her phone. The glow from her screen reflected on her face, and for a brief second I saw a man's face on the screen. Not a wallpaper, a video call. I froze. "Friend checking in?" I asked lightly. "Yeah," she said too fast. "My cousin." Then, a sound, a soft thud in the hallway, then another, like someone trying a doorknob. I turned toward the door. She didn't even flinch. "You hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" That's when I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise. I walked to the peephole. Two shadows stood just beyond the door, silhouettes of men, one tall with a hood pulled up, the other leaning close to the door frame. Whispering, I stepped back. "Lena, who's out there?" She blinked, playing dumb. "What are you talking about?" But her hand slid toward her bag, the same one with the metallic glint. I didn't think. I just acted. Grabbed my phone, thumbed the emergency button, hit speaker. 9911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice echoed through the room. The effect was instant. The men outside moved, fast. Footsteps thundered down the hall. Lena cursed, grabbed her bag, and bolted. The door slammed behind her. I locked it, every muscle shaking. My pulse was so loud I could barely hear the operator. "Sir? Hello? Are you safe?" I think so," I stammered. "Someone tried to, I don't know, break in." By the time the officers arrived 40 minutes later, I'd replayed the whole scene 100 times. The security footage showed her, and two men, walking down the hall, circling twice, then disappearing when I called. The cops told me they'd been running scams on travelers, fake profiles, quick robberies, easy targets. One officer said, "You did the right thing, man. Most people freeze." I didn't feel heroic. I felt hollow. When they left, I sat by the window staring at the rain. The wine bottle still sweated on the table, unopened. And all I could think was, how many other doors did they knock on tonight? I didn't sleep that night. Every sound from the hallway made me flinch. By morning, I'd packed half my things, ready to leave Seattle. But work had other plans. 3 more days of meetings, data reports, polite conversations that felt meaningless. When I logged into my morning video call, my coworker joked, "You look like you've seen a ghost." Something like that, I said. I didn't tell anyone the full story. What was I supposed to say? I almost got robbed because I was lonely. That night I skipped dinner and sat on the hotel bed scrolling through Tinder, half out of habit, half out of curiosity. Lena's profile was gone, deleted. I didn't feel angry, just embarrassed. Loneliness makes you do stupid things. By day 2, the cops emailed me a follow-up. They'd found my report matched 2 similar cases in the area. Both men in business hotels, both lured by women with different names, but the same description. That metallic glint I'd seen, probably a knife. I started checking my locks twice, then 3 times before bed. The silence that used to just bother me now scared me. I kept the TV on low all night just to drown out my thoughts. But something else started to bother me more. Why had she hesitated when I called 911? Why did she look scared? Not at me, but at the men outside. That thought kept me awake longer than the fear. On my last night in Seattle, I decided to take a walk. The rain had finally stopped, the air sharp and clean. I wandered downtown, passing coffee shops and late-night diners, letting the city noise replace the memory of that quiet hallway. Then I saw her, Lena, standing under a streetlight across the intersection. She wasn't dressed like before. Her jacket was torn, her hair matted. She looked thinner, frightened. For a moment I thought I was imagining her, but when she saw me, her eyes widened. "Ryan," she called softly, like someone saying a name they didn't expect to say again. Every instinct told me to turn around, but curiosity overruled fear. I crossed the street. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "The cops are looking for you." She shook her head. "I didn't know what they were planning, I swear. They said it was just going to be a distraction, a quick grab. I didn't know they'd hurt people." I stared at her. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Why tell me this?" "Because you didn't deserve it," she said. "You were nice." Her voice cracked. Before I could respond, a black sedan turned the corner. She looked over her shoulder and froze. "They found me," she whispered. "Who?" "The guys from that night." The car slowed near us. My heart kicked into gear. I grabbed her arm. "Come on." We ducked into a narrow alley, sprinting through puddles until we reached a lit storefront. I called 911 again, hands shaking. This time, I didn't hesitate. By the time police arrived, the car was gone. Lena was crying, saying she wanted protection, a deal, something. That was the last time I saw her. The next day, detectives told me she'd agreed to testify. The men had been running scams from Portland to Vancouver. She was part of it, but not by choice. I flew home that night. It's been 2 years since that night. I still travel for work, still check into hotels, still unpack the same suitcase. But I've changed. I double lock everything. I notice the small details. Who's in the lobby? Who lingers too long near my door? Sometimes, when it rains, I think about Lena. Not the version from the profile, or the girl with the wine bottle, but the one under the streetlight, scared, trying to undo something she couldn't control. I don't know what happened to her after the trial. I never asked. Maybe she disappeared again. Maybe she finally started over. As for me, I deleted every dating app. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. Because that night taught me something about people, about loneliness, and about trust. Loneliness can make you open doors you'd never open otherwise. But sometimes, what walks through isn't company. It's danger wearing a friendly face. Loneliness is not an invitation. It's a warning. When we let isolation drive our choices, we stop seeing red flags for what they are. Connection is important, but not at the cost of safety or judgment. Trust should be earned slowly, not swiped into existence. In the end, it's better to sit alone with peace than share the room with danger disguised as comfort. It's strange how rain can sound like memory. Sometimes it's gentle, like the soft rhythm of someone breathing beside you. Other times it hits hard, reminding you of everything you've tried to forget. The night I met Caleb, Bristol was drowning in rain. That endless November kind of rain that turns the air cold and heavy. I remember thinking it would ruin my hair, that it would make me look nervous before I even arrived. I didn't realize until later that it was a warning of sorts. The world whispering, "Not again, Ivy." It had been 3 years since I'd been on a date. 3 long years of saying no to anyone who tried, of deleting apps before even opening them, of convincing myself that maybe I was better off alone. My last relationship had ended like a car crash you could see coming but couldn't stop. His name was Eric, a musician who thought love meant ownership. I'd learned to lie about where I was, who I was with, what I wore. I'd learned to smile through the fear. By the time it was over, I wasn't even sure who I was anymore. But then came Caleb. He messaged me first, polite, funny, the kind of man who used punctuation and asked questions that made me feel seen. He told me he taught English at a nearby school and liked poetry, that he was tired of superficial people. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So when he asked to meet at a small cafe on Gloucester Road, I said yes. The cafe was half empty that night. The air smelled like coffee and wet coats. He was already there when I arrived. Dark hair, slightly messy, a book beside his cup. He stood when he saw me, smiled like he'd been waiting all day. "Ivy?" he said, and I nodded. His voice was soft, measured, safe almost. I thought, finally, someone normal. For the first 20 minutes, everything felt easy. We talked about teaching, music, movies. He told me about his students, how they called him Mr. Reed like he was ancient. I laughed. He made me feel almost like my old self again. Then my phone buzzed. "Who keeps texting you?" he asked, still smiling. "Oh, just my flatmate," I said. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on the screen. "You should put it on silent, it's rude." Something in his tone tightened the air between us. Not sharp, but possessive. A small echo of a voice I'd heard before. I brushed it off. He's just old-fashioned, I told myself. But little things started to add up. When the waiter smiled at me, Caleb's jaw flexed. When I mentioned my sister, he asked if she lived with me or just showed up whenever. His questions started to feel like inspection rather than interest. My stomach nodded with déjà vu. By dessert, I wasn't sure if I was imagining it. The way his eyes followed every move I made, the way he mirrored my words like he was taking notes. I excused myself to the restroom and texted my sister, "Call me in 5 mins. Emergency." When I came back, he looked calm. Too calm. "You were gone a while," he said. "Talking to someone?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Yeah, I'll come right now," I said quickly into the receiver, pretending panic. "Sorry, Caleb. My sister's not well. I have to go." He reached for my wrist, his hand gentle but firm. "I'll drive you," he said, voice low. I pulled free, smiling politely. "No, it's just a block away." Outside, the rain hit my face like applause. I walked fast, breathing hard. Each step away from that cafe felt like survival. When I got home, I cried. Not because of him, but because of me. Because even after all this time, I still doubted my instincts. Because I almost stayed. Healing isn't a straight line. People tell you that like it's a comfort, but what they don't say is how easy it is to slide backward. After that night with Caleb, I told myself I was fine. I'd dodged a bullet. I'd proven I could spot the signs. But underneath, something familiar began to stir. That quiet voice that said, "You attract the wrong kind of men." I met Eric when I was 21, working at a bookstore. He was charming in the way trouble always is. A smile that dared you to say no. He played guitar, wrote songs about heartbreak. He said I was his muse. It sounds romantic until you realize it means he's writing about your pain. At first he was kind. He'd wait outside my work, walk me home, bring me coffee. Then he started asking where I was going, who I was seeing. It was subtle, concern disguised as care. "I just worry about you," he'd say, and I'd believe him. But soon, my friends stopped calling. My world shrank to the size of his approval. When I finally left, he showed up at my door 2 nights later, crying, apologizing, saying he couldn't live without me. The police had to tell him to stop. That was 3 years ago. But when Caleb said, "You should put it on silent," my body remembered before my mind did. I started seeing signs everywhere. A car that slowed when I walked home, a shadow near my flat's gate, a message request from an unknown number. I told myself it was just paranoia, but some part of me was certain. Someone was watching again. One evening, I saw Caleb's name on a local Reddit thread. Anyone else get bad vibes from this guy? Met him at a cafe, kept asking where I lived. My heart sank. I wasn't the only one. I deleted my dating app that night. For days, I jumped at every sound, checked the locks twice. I kept thinking about that moment. His calm expression, his hand around my wrist, that half smile. Like he already knew I'd try to leave. Healing isn't a straight line. Sometimes it's a circle, and you find yourself back where you started, just praying you can break it this time. By December, Bristol's cold settled in deep. I wrapped myself in layers, avoided the cafe street, ignored every unknown number. My sister Hannah came over often, sensing the weight I wasn't saying out loud. "You can't live scared forever," she said one night, handing me a mug of tea. "I'm not scared," I lied. "I'm just being careful." She smiled softly. "You deserve normal, Ivy." But what did normal even mean anymore? One evening, while walking home from work, I caught sight of a man across the street. Tall, dark coat, umbrella tilted just so. My stomach twisted. He wasn't looking at me exactly, but it felt like he was waiting. I walked faster, my heartbeat matching the rain. When I turned onto my street, I glanced back. He was gone. Inside my flat, the silence pressed close. I checked the windows, the locks. My reflection in the glass looked pale, tired, smaller than I remembered. I thought about calling someone, Hannah maybe, but I didn't want to sound paranoid. I turned on the TV just for the noise. That night, I dreamed of the cafe, of Caleb sitting alone, his eyes fixed on me even when I wasn't there. By January, I was exhausted. Every noise outside made me flinch. I kept telling myself I was safe, that Caleb was just another mistake, a lesson, not a curse. But one evening, as I walked home, I saw something taped to my door. A single white envelope. No name, no stamp. Inside was a photo, me at the cafe window that night, looking out at the rain. My heart dropped. I reported it to the police. They took notes, nodded, said they'd keep an eye. But I could see it in their faces. They didn't believe it was serious. Just another anxious woman, they thought. For days, nothing happened. Then one morning I saw his profile picture again, not on the app but in a people you may know suggestion on Facebook. I hadn't told him my last name. I deleted my account immediately. It felt like drowning in déjà vu. Every man's kindness started to look like danger. Every glance felt like surveillance. Hannah finally convinced me to see a therapist. "You can't let one man define your safety," she said. But I think she misunderstood. It wasn't one man. It was the pattern. The way charm could hide control. The way danger could wear kindness like a mask. By spring, the rain had slowed. I'd moved flats. New address, new locks, new number. Slowly, the noise in my head quieted. I started painting again. Small canvases of stormy skies and narrow streets. Life was still fragile, but it was mine. One evening, as I stood by my new window, I saw it. Rain streaking the glass just like that first night. For a moment, I thought I saw his reflection behind me. But when I turned, it was only me. It hit me then. All those years of fear had taught me to listen. to trust that voice inside, the one that said, "Run now," the one that had saved me twice. I made tea, sat by the window and let the rain fall. This time it didn't sound like memory. It sounded like release. Sometimes survival isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's leaving before the danger unfolds. It's trusting your instinct when no one else believes you. The moral of Ivy's story isn't just about avoiding bad men. It's about recognizing that healing means never silencing yourself again. Because the most dangerous thing a woman can do isn't running away. It's convincing herself there's no reason to. I've never been good at trusting people, especially strangers. It's not that I'm inherently paranoid, it's experience speaking. Years of quiet routines, long nights alone in my apartment, and online messages that fizzled out after polite introductions had taught me the hard way that people are often more interested in the idea of you than in you. Meeting Julia Kane felt different. At least I wanted it to feel different. I first saw her at a company networking event, standing in a corner, laughing at something someone said with that easy magnetic smile. She noticed me noticing her, and for reasons I still can't fully explain, she walked over and introduced herself. That single conversation lingered in my mind for days. The sound of her laugh, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. 2 weeks later, she asked if I wanted to meet at my apartment for drinks. Normally, I'd never have agreed. Meeting someone for the first time in a private space isn't my style, but I wanted to challenge myself, to trust. I told myself, she's just Julia. Keep boundaries, pay attention, trust cautiously. I spent hours preparing that evening, tidying the apartment until it looked like a page from a magazine, lighting autumn-scented candles, and creating a playlist of soft jazz that would fill the corners with warmth. By the time she arrived, my heart was a steady drum, not from nerves but anticipation. She stepped inside and her eyes lit up. "Wow, your place is cozy. And these candles, smells like autumn." I smiled, fumbling a little with my words. "Thanks." I wanted it to feel welcoming. We settled onto the couch with glasses of red wine, the city lights spilling through the windows. She talked about her work, her travels, favorite books. I shared stories of my childhood, my little quirks, and for the first time in weeks, I felt that calm bubble of genuine connection. I didn't notice the time passing. The conversation flowed naturally, laughter punctuating the soft jazz. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe. Maybe this could be real. Maybe trust wasn't a fool's game after all. Then my phone buzzed. My sister, concerned as always. I whispered reassurances, speaking just loud enough for her to hear. When I hung up, Julia's smile had shifted. It was different, sharper, calculating. "Why'd you answer her?" she asked quietly, stepping closer. "Shouldn't we have each other's attention?" I laughed nervously. "It was just a quick check-in." "Nothing." Her eyes narrowed. Something about the way she leaned forward made me feel a cold trickle of unease. That night I didn't know it yet, but my instincts would become my lifeline. For a while everything seemed normal again. We talked, we laughed. I tried to convince myself her earlier sharpness was a fluke, a momentary reaction. But then she began speaking about boundaries in a way that unsettled me. She casually mentioned her past year in a mental health facility, describing behaviors and limitations that, in her mind, were non-negotiable. It wasn't the mental health history itself. It was the intensity of her tone, the sudden rigidity, the almost imperceptible edge in her voice. My gut tightened. Something about her words felt less like sharing, more like a warning. We moved to the kitchen to grab another glass of wine. That's when the first flash of real danger happened. She stepped closer, her movements abrupt. "Shelley, why do you keep distracting yourself?" she asked, voice low but hard. Before I could respond, her hand gripped the counter. I froze for a heartbeat, instincts screaming. And then, She swung. The edge of the wine bottle caught my arm, shattering the glass. I ducked instinctively, feeling the shards near my forearm. Panic and adrenaline surged, and I grabbed the heavy lamp sitting on the counter, swinging it instinctively toward her shoulder. Ceramic and metal clashed, the sound echoing through the apartment. My heart raced, and every fiber of my being screamed, "Get out." I didn't wait. I bolted toward the door, fumbling for my keys as she shouted behind me. The hallway seemed endless, every second stretching like hours. I flung open the door, dialing 911 while stumbling down the stairs, lungs burning, hands trembling. The sound of sirens was the sweetest thing I had ever heard. Police arrived within minutes, lights flashing, voices commanding. I barely had the presence of mind to give them my statement. Julia was gone. Just gone. Vanished into the night before they could catch her. The officers shook their heads sympathetically as they confirmed what neighbors and co-workers whispered quietly to me later. Her history of aggression was well documented. I had narrowly escaped. That night, lying in a spare bed in my sister's apartment, I realized how fragile safety can be, how easily charm can disguise danger. The warmth and humor I had felt earlier in the night had evaporated, replaced by a gnawing awareness that not everyone who smiles is trustworthy. I didn't sleep. My mind replayed every detail. The way she leaned, the tone in her voice, the sudden shift from light-hearted charm to something sharp, predatory. I knew that I had been lucky. Not everyone survives encounters like this unscathed. Weeks later, I moved into a new apartment. Everything changed. Lights on at night, phone close, doors double-locked. Every routine became a shield. My world shrank at first, cautious, careful, but it was necessary. I could no longer take anything for granted. Returning to dating apps was a slow process. I observed profiles carefully. I tested boundaries, video called anyone I was remotely interested in before agreeing to meet. I had learned the hard way that instinct is the first line of defense. I had learned to watch for inconsistencies, subtle red flags, and the way charm can be a weapon. I built up routines, rituals that made me feel safe. I walked in daylight. I let someone meet me first in a public space. I trusted cautiously. Months later, I was cautiously dating again. Coffee first. Daylight. Observing actions over words. My heart had healed, slowly, scarred, but stronger. I knew now that charm is not a substitute for trust. Safety is earned before intimacy. Boundaries are not optional. I smiled faintly at my own mantra. Keep the doors open and the windows locked. A reminder that I could welcome people into my life without compromising safety. That I could trust cautiously, listen to my instincts, and protect myself while still allowing space for connection. I hadn't let fear define me. I had let it teach me. And sometimes, teaching is the only way to survive the ones who blur the line between charm and danger. Trust must be earned, not assumed. Charm and charisma can mask danger, and boundaries are non-negotiable. Safety and self-respect come first. Instincts are vital. Learning to trust cautiously is not weakness. It is wisdom, and sometimes the difference between danger and survival. I used to think dating apps were a kind of modern confession booth. You show up with your best smile, confess your loneliness, and hope someone absolves you with a match. That's how I met Teresa Quinn. My name's Lucas Hale, 38, freelance graphic designer, coffee addict, part-time optimist. After 2 years of pandemic-era video calls and half-hearted first dates, I told myself I'd give it one more try. Maybe this time would be different. Teresa's profile caught my attention because she didn't sound like everyone else. Her bio read, "I like abandoned places and late-night drives." Good grammar's a turn-on. It sounded quirky, a little dark, but still grounded. We messaged for a week before she agreed to meet. She used punctuation, real punctuation, which is rare online. She asked about the kind of art I liked, my favorite films, even my go-to gas station snack. She laughed at my answer. Red Bull and beef jerky. I have the diet of a sleep-deprived trucker. Her replies felt genuine, easy, warm. We settled on a jazz bar on West Belmont. Cozy, a little old-fashioned. The kind of place where you can hear a saxophone over your own heartbeat. The day of the date, I worked too long, rushed through a shower, and changed shirts 3 times. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard, but I also didn't want to look like I'd given up. Outside, snow had started falling. That Chicago kind of snow that doesn't twinkle or flutter, it just commits. The city lights blurred behind it like smudged paint. At 7:45 p.m., just as I parked near the bar, she texted, "Hey, the place is full. Can we meet somewhere quieter? I know a spot, it's close." It didn't feel unusual. People change plans all the time. "Sure," I typed back. "Send me the address." 15 minutes later, I was driving through a neighborhood I didn't recognize. Industrial, brick warehouses, old signage half covered in snow. My GPS arrow spun twice, recalculating, as if the street didn't officially exist anymore. Then her message buzzed. "I'm inside the red house at the end." That's when my gut started whispering. The red house wasn't really red, more like rust and forgotten paint, a place with boarded-up windows and a sagging porch. Still, curiosity's a funny thing. It disguises itself as courage until you're already in the wrong place. I parked under a flickering streetlight and texted, "Hey, just got here." A reply came instantly. "Doors open, come in." That smiley face froze me. Teresa hadn't used emojis once in all our chats. She always typed in full sentences, no fluff. Something about that smiley, too casual, too wrong, set off alarms in my head. The snow made soft crunches under my boots as I walked toward the gate. The air smelled like metal, like rust or blood. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once, then nothing. I took one more step, and that's when I saw them. 2 shapes behind the side fence, moving slow, like they thought I couldn't see. A whisper cut through the quiet. "He's here." My pulse went nuclear. I forced myself to stay calm. I pulled out my phone, pretended to check something, and tapped open my rideshare app. My thumb hovered over the pickup button. Then a voice from the dark said, "Hey you, Lucas. Teresa said you were cool." I swallowed hard, forcing a casual laugh. "Yeah, she texted. Said she's running late. I'll wait in the car." The voice didn't answer. I turned slowly, every nerve in my body screaming. I walked back toward my car, not too fast, not too slow, because running makes predators chase. Snow crunched under my shoes, loud as breaking glass. When I reached my car, I slid in, locked the doors, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the alley like a blade. The figures at the fence stepped back, then melted into shadow. I didn't breathe until I'd driven 3 blocks away. I parked under a gas station canopy and just sat there gripping the steering wheel until the tremors stopped. My phone screen glowed pale in the dark. I opened Bumble. Our chat was still there, or at least I thought it was. The last message, the one with the smiley face, was gone. Deleted. Her profile picture, the one with the sunlight in her hair, the smirk that looked like a secret, had vanished too. I stared at the empty chat bubble. My chest ached like I'd been sucker punched. At first I thought maybe she'd unmatched me, embarrassed or second-guessing, but the logical part of my brain knew better. Someone else had been using that profile. Someone who knew how to talk like her. I drove straight to the nearest police station. The officer on duty, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, listened while I told the story. When I finished, she sighed. "You did the right thing turning back. We've had a few like that lately. Fake profiles, luring people to isolated spots. It's organized." "Organized?" She nodded. "We think small groups, maybe robberies, maybe worse. People trust a pretty face on an app. You'd be surprised how many don't make it to the station." Her words stayed with me long after I left. Back at my hotel, I sat on the bed in my half-buttoned shirt. the one I'd picked so carefully earlier. I looked at my reflection in the black TV screen, the faint outline of a man who'd almost been stupid enough to walk into a trap. All that preparation, all that hope, for a maybe. I poured myself a plastic cup of whiskey from the minibar and watched the snow drift sideways outside the window. The city glowed orange, like it was burning quietly under the storm. Somewhere between the second and third sip, I opened Bumble again. I scrolled through old messages, tiny ghosts of connection, jokes, plans, confessions, little digital illusions we tell ourselves mean something. I could almost hear Teresa's laugh, the one she'd typed but never spoken. I closed the app and tossed my phone onto the nightstand. In the morning, I stuck a note to the mirror with a hotel pen and a yellow sticky pad. Meet people, not profiles. It felt too simple, but maybe that's what truth is. Something that only sounds profound when it's too late. I left Chicago the next morning, heading south on I-55 with coffee that tasted like burnt hope and radio static for company. The snow turned to sleet, then rain, then nothing at all. At a rest stop outside Bloomington, I sat in the car and thought about how close I'd come to being another police statistic. The idea of dating apps made me feel tired now, like staring into a hall of mirrors, each reflection promising something real, but offering only another version of loneliness. Back home in Springfield, I told a few close friends what had happened. Most said the same thing. You were lucky. I agreed, but it didn't feel like luck. It felt like instinct finally earning its paycheck. A week later, I got an email from Bumble's safety team confirming the profile had been linked to multiple scams. They thanked me for reporting it. That night, I walked outside, watched snow melt into rain, and thought about how small the world can get when it's filtered through screens. We keep searching for connection, but sometimes the hunt blinds us to danger. We forget that people online are just digital echoes, and not every echo wants you to find where it came from. I'm still open to love, I think, but now I'd rather meet someone in the checkout line at the grocery store than in a chat bubble that can vanish in an instant, because the red house at the end wasn't just a trap in an alley, it was a warning. Not every door you're invited to walk through deserves to be opened. In a world built on profiles and pixels, safety must come before curiosity. Charm can be coded, and danger can wear a friendly smile. Trust your instincts. They're the only part of you the internet can't impersonate. Meet people, not profiles. I never thought I'd feel powerless while standing on the sidewalk outside my best friend's apartment. But that night my heart was racing, my palms slick with sweat, and my mind replaying every warning I'd ever given myself about Connor Reed. Giselle Monroe and I had been inseparable since college, two awkward freshmen thrown together in a small dorm on the outskirts of campus. She had this energy about her, fearless, brilliant, and stubborn, in a way that could infuriate you, but also make you admire her. I, on the other hand, had always been the cautious one. I liked rules, boundaries, order. When we met Connor, I didn't like him. Something about the way he looked at Giselle, intense, calculating, like she was a prize he'd won rather than a person he cared for, set off alarm bells in my head. At first, Giselle didn't see it. She laughed at my concerns, brushed them off. "Shawnee, he's just passionate. You're imagining things." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that she could see what I couldn't. But over the next few years, his obsession became obvious. Constant texts, midnight calls, showing up at her classes unannounced. The guy had a knack for inserting himself into her life at every possible moment. So when she finally ended it, I felt a mix of pride and fear. Pride that she finally stood up for herself. Fear that Connor wouldn't let go. He had a history of dramatics, and Giselle was already trembling the morning after she broke up with him. I promised myself I would stay vigilant, keep her safe no matter what. That night, I had followed her at a discreet distance, just to make sure she got back inside safely. The street was quiet, the summer air sticky and heavy with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt and fallen maple leaves. I saw her walking, headphones in, trying to clear her mind, oblivious to the shadow that had been tailing her. And then I saw him. Connor stood near the corner, his face half hidden by the dark eyes locked on her. My chest tightened. I wanted to yell, to run, to grab her, all at once. Giselle froze as well, her body stiff, shoulders tense. "Connor, please, I told you this is over," she said, her voice trembling but firm. His step forward made my stomach flip. I need to know why. "I can't live without you," he said. Every word dripped with desperation, with something darker I couldn't name. I ran up, heart pounding, gripping her arm. "Go inside, now!" I hissed, dragging her toward the nearest streetlight. He froze momentarily, but then, inexplicably, he pulled a bottle from his jacket. My stomach dropped. "You'll see. You'll all see," he screamed, before pouring alcohol over himself. My lungs caught in my throat as he struck a match. Everything after that happened in a blur: screaming neighbors, the smell of smoke, fire licking the sidewalk. I yanked Giselle away just as a passerby tackled him, and firefighters arrived seconds later. Connor was screaming, struggling, and then he was gone, carted off by paramedics, leaving behind the echo of his madness. Giselle clung to me, shaking, tears streaking her face. I'll never date anyone without knowing them completely again," she whispered. I held her tighter, whispering, "You're safe now. That's what matters." The days after that night felt unreal. Giselle didn't want to leave her apartment. The moment the wind rattled the window or a car door slammed outside, she flinched. Every knock at the door sent her heart racing. And I couldn't blame her. No one should have to face that kind of terror. I stayed with her as much as I could. We made plans for short walks, slowly extending the distance from her building. We laughed a little during those walks, tried to reclaim pieces of life that Connor had tried to steal from her. But the shadows lingered. She'd wake in the middle of the night, checking the locks, peering through the blinds. It was during one of those walks that she finally opened up about the past few years with Connor. She described the obsessive texts, the calls in the dead of night, the way he tried to isolate her from friends. My stomach tightened with anger and guilt. I had warned her over and over, but she'd been too kind, too trusting, too hopeful. And yet, she had survived. We started making practical changes. She installed additional locks, changed routines, and we even started taking self-defense classes together. I reminded her that she didn't have to be brave all the time, just consistent in protecting herself. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but necessary. Slowly, Giselle began to reclaim her confidence. Small victories, walking to the corner store, sitting in a cafe without fear, even laughing at silly jokes again, became milestones. Every day was a test, every step forward a victory, and I was there for every single one of them. Weeks passed, and although Giselle was safer, the psychological scars remained. The fear manifested in nightmares, panic attacks, and even avoidance of social events. I worried about her, but I also worried about what she would think if she knew how much I had feared for her life. One night, she admitted the truth. "I can't stop thinking about what could have happened," she said, her voice cracking. "Every step I take, I see him there. I feel like I'm still running." I took her hands in mine. "You're not running anymore. You survived. You're alive. And we'll make sure it stays that way." We started attending therapy sessions together, focusing on trauma recovery and coping strategies. Giselle began journaling, writing down every fear, every anxious thought, until she could look at them without panic. And slowly, very slowly, she started to breathe again. As summer turned into early fall, Giselle began venturing out more confidently. We went to cafes, watched movies in theaters, and even attended small parties. Each step was deliberate, intentional. Every laugh, every smile, was a small victory over the fear Connor had inflicted. We celebrated these victories, acknowledging each as proof of her strength. And one evening, as we walked home under a sky lit with streetlights and fallen leaves, Giselle whispered, I think I'm finally ready to live again." I smiled, my heart full. You've been living, Giselle. You just didn't know it yet. Months later, Giselle had almost completely regained her sense of normalcy. She started dating again cautiously, meeting people slowly, never rushing. She smiled freely, laughed often, and even allowed herself to trust again, not blindly, but wisely. I realized then that the nights of terror, the moments of panic, the months of recovery, they all led to one lesson. Strength isn't about never feeling fear. It's about moving forward despite it. That night, sitting on her balcony, Giselle turned to me and said softly, "I wouldn't have made it without you." I shook my head. "No, you would have. You just needed someone to remind you of it." We watched the sunset, a calm settling over us both. Connor's shadow may have haunted us, but it could not define our lives. We had survived, we had learned, and we had become stronger than fear. True strength isn't the absence of fear, but the courage to face it. Life may place danger, obsession, and betrayal in our path, but survival, resilience, and support from those who care can turn trauma into empowerment. I used to think loneliness was something you could fix, like repainting a wall or changing a light bulb. That once I transitioned and finally started living as myself, the rest would just fall into place. Friends, maybe love, maybe even peace. But what they don't tell you is that being true to yourself doesn't automatically mean people will meet you there. It just means you stop pretending. My name's Renee Hollis, 44 years old, and I live in Tacoma, Washington. I work as an HR manager for a mid-sized manufacturing company. Spreadsheets by day, microwave dinners by night. It's not glamorous, but after years of chaos, stability feels like luxury. The thing is, stability gets quiet, and quiet gets lonely. After my transition 5 years ago, I promised myself I wouldn't hide again. I'd been invisible enough for one lifetime, first hiding from others, then from myself. But visibility, I've learned, comes with risk. Still, one Friday evening, scrolling through my phone while rain tapped against the window, I decided maybe it was time to try dating again. I joined REO, True Uite, a small LGBTQ+ dating app where people posted pictures with messy hair and captions about cats and poetry. That's where I met Charlene. She was 39, a copy editor who loved bad puns and worse coffee. Her first message read, "Tell me your favorite smell, and I'll tell you who you are." I wrote back, "Cinnamon, because it's warm even when it burns." We talked for 3 weeks. It felt easy, natural, like we both knew what it was to rebuild ourselves from pieces. She told me about her rescue dog, a border collie named Misty. I told her about my ridiculous addiction to cozy mystery novels. When she asked if I wanted to meet in person, I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. We picked a small cafe downtown, the kind that always smells like cinnamon rolls and second chances. That night I stood in front of the mirror longer than I should have, brushing my hair, straightening my skirt, telling myself I looked okay. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, I just wanted to feel seen. By the time I got there, the air was heavy with mist. Inside, the cafe was all soft lights and jazz on low volume. I ordered chamomile tea, sat by the window and waited. Every few minutes, the bell over the door would ring and I'd look up, half smiling, half scared. At 7:12 p.m., the door jingled again, and everything changed. He was taller than I expected. Older, too. Same jacket Charlene wore in her photos, but hanging awkwardly on his shoulders. "Renee?" he asked, voice deeper, more impatient than I'd imagined. Something inside me hesitated, but politeness overrode instinct. I stood and smiled. "Hi, you must be Charlene?" He nodded, sitting down across from me. "Yeah, that's me. Wow, you look exactly how I pictured." Except he didn't say it like a compliment, more like an observation, a test. "Nice to finally meet you," I said carefully. He leaned in, elbows on the table. "So tell me, When did you decide to, change everything? I froze. That's kind of personal for a first date. He laughed, low and humorless. I'm just curious. My daughter's trans-o, actually. Thought meeting you might help me understand her. For a second, I didn't process the words. Then the pieces snapped together like broken glass. Wait, are you saying you're her father? Where's Charlene? He shrugged, eyes darting away. She doesn't know I'm here. I saw your messages on her phone. You seemed interesting. The cafe sounds dimmed, conversations fading to a background hum. My skin prickled. You shouldn't have done that, I whispered. He smiled. Relax. I'm not a bad guy. I just want to see what makes people like you tick. The way he said, people like you hit harder than I expected. I pushed my chair back slowly. I think we're done here. Don't be dramatic, he muttered. Sit down. A couple near the counter turned toward us. His face tightened. Look, I'm just trying to talk. No, I said louder, steady this time. You're trying to invade. The barista glanced over. I caught her eye and she walked toward us. He stiffened, mumbled something, then stood abruptly. For a heartbeat, he hovered, eyes cold, unreadable, before storming out. The bell over the door chimed once, twice, then silence. I sat there, hands shaking, pretending my heart wasn't pounding loud enough to fill the room. The barista, a young woman with short purple hair, came over softly. Hey, are you okay? I will be, I managed. Do you want me to call someone? I shook my head. Could you walk me to my car? She nodded without hesitation. We stepped outside together. The drizzle had started again, the kind that clings instead of falls. At my car, I thanked her, fumbling for words. You didn't have to, she interrupted, smiling gently. Everyone deserves to feel safe leaving a cafe. Her kindness almost broke me. When I finally sat inside my car, the adrenaline hit. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. For 10 minutes, I just breathed. That night, I wrote in my journal, people can wear kindness like a costume. The trick is to see the zipper before they get too close. The next morning, I deleted the app. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. Still, for days, I couldn't shake the image of him sitting there, using his daughter's name like a key to my trust. 3 days later, I got an email. Subject: I'm so sorry. It was from Charlene. She'd found out what her father had done. She'd written, he's been struggling since I came out. I didn't know he'd go that far. I'm horrified. Please don't think I was part of it. I stared at the screen for a long time, heart heavy. I wrote back, thank you for saying that. I'm not angry at you. I'm just sad it happened. You deserve better than to have your father weaponize your identity. She replied once more, you too. You didn't deserve that either. After that, we didn't talk again. But something shifted in me. Not bitterness, just understanding. The world isn't divided between good and evil. It's divided between those who listen and those who refuse to. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to sit quietly when someone crosses the line. It's been a year since that night. I still go to the same cafe, different corner, different mug, same cinnamon smell. Sometimes I bring my journal, sometimes just a book. I've made a habit of smiling at the barista who walked me out that night. Her name's Jenna. We talk about podcasts, recipes, the rain. No apps this time. No strangers' faces glowing on my phone. Just real voices, real eyes. I've learned something about fear. It doesn't disappear when you confront it. It just learns to sit quietly in the passenger seat while you keep driving. When I think back to that man, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel pity. Because he came to that cafe thinking I was the one pretending, and left without realizing he was the one wearing a mask. I don't hide anymore. And if being visible means facing moments like that again, so be it. I'd rather be seen and stand my ground than shrink back into the shadows just to make someone else comfortable. Some nights, when the cafe windows fog up and the rain blurs the city lights. I catch my reflection in the glass, tired maybe, but whole. That's enough. True courage isn't just about surviving danger. It's about recognizing when to walk away from it. People can disguise cruelty as curiosity or control as concern, but your safety and dignity are not up for debate. Kindness deserves discernment. Not everyone who smiles means well. And no matter how lonely the world makes you feel, never trade your peace for someone else's misunderstanding of who you are. I never thought I'd let myself hope again. Not after the years of heartbreak, the nights spent scrolling endlessly through dating apps, and the mornings I'd wake up realizing I had poured myself into someone who didn't even notice my absence. Charming liars, men who treated promises like they were punchlines, emotionally unavailable types. I dated them all. And every time I'd swore this would be different. When Logan Hart messaged me on Tinder, I felt that cautious spark of optimism. 2 weeks of polite, funny, slightly shy conversations had me smiling more than I had in months. He talked about sailing, about cooking, about wanting real conversations. No pressure, no vague promises, just talk that felt normal. I chose Rossi's Bistro for our first in-person date. Cozy Italian, amber light glowing from wall sconces, soft jazz in the background, a place that whispered intimacy without being overbearing. I arrived early, trying to steady my pulse, tugging at the hem of my blouse like some anxious teenager. Then he appeared, tall, neatly dressed, that half-nervous smile that somehow made him seem trustworthy. "You look amazing," he said, pulling out my chair. I laughed softly, settling in. Flattery before appetizers? Dangerous start. We talked easily. He told me about restoring old boats. I talked about the art studio I ran with my sister. The conversation flowed, light and unforced. I laughed at his dry humor. He listened when I spoke. For the first time in years, I thought maybe this could be steady. Maybe I could trust someone again. And then his phone lit up. A name flashed across the screen. Gilda. I didn't see the text, but his expression changed just for a second. He flipped the phone face down with a speed that made my stomach drop. "Work call," he muttered, a little too quickly. I forced a smile, trying to shake off the tension crawling up my arms. "Late night for work, huh?" "Yeah," he said, forcing a laugh. "My business partner's dramatic." I nodded, sipping my water, trying to believe him. But the nervous energy in his posture was hard to ignore. He kept glancing at the door, shoulders stiff, fingers drumming lightly against the table. I told myself I was being paranoid. But as dessert arrived, tiramisu, soft and sweet, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something wasn't right. Then the door opened. The woman who stepped in scanned the room like a predator. My pulse slammed against my ribcage. When her eyes locked on Logan, it was like someone had turned off the lights. "Logan," she said, calm but trembling. "So this is your client dinner?" I blinked, unable to speak. He stood abruptly. "Gilda, not here," he said, his voice clipped. "Not here?" she snapped, voice cracking. "You promised me this was over." My stomach dropped. My tea, the soft laugh I'd been holding in, everything I thought I felt. It evaporated. He's married. Or maybe it was worse. He's in something serious, and never mentioned it. "Shelley, Logan started, but she cut him off. "Don't you dare lie again." I grabbed my glass of wine in reflex, almost slamming it onto the table. Red splashed like a wound across the white tablecloth. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, whispers and curious glances bouncing through the bistro. "Gilda, please," I tried, trying to steady my voice. "Let's just—" "Don't you talk to me," she shouted, and it felt like the air cracked around us. Logan sank into the chair, face pale, hands trembling. His silence confirmed it. He hadn't told me everything. The manager arrived, intervening gently, trying to calm the storm. Outside, I watched her collapse under the streetlight as the police arrived. I didn't follow. I didn't need to see it all. My heart ached not for him or her, but for the part of me that had believed in the possibility of something real. Back at my sister's apartment, I sank into the couch with a mug of tea, staring at the city lights blurred by rain-streaked windows. Logan's messages pinged. Please let me explain. She's unstable. I deleted them all. I let myself feel the disappointment fully this time. No excuses, no rationalizations. I had wanted steady, real conversations, and instead, I'd gotten a mask. I'd wanted someone who listened, who was honest, who showed up fully. I realized tonight that I had been seeking fragments of what I deserved from someone who couldn't even offer the truth. My sister sat across from me, gentle but firm. You okay? Yeah, I said, my voice quiet, just tired of being someone's mistake. The city outside didn't care. Couples walked hand in hand under umbrellas, laughing and believing the stories they were told. I whispered to myself, next time, coffee first. Daylight. No wine. The next few weeks were a blur of introspection. I deleted Logan's number, avoided the dating apps, and focused on my studio. I painted. I sketched. I spent time with my sister. I rebuilt boundaries I hadn't realized had been shattered over and over. Dating again felt terrifying. Not because I feared men, but because I feared trusting myself. I had learned that my optimism could be weaponized, that I needed patience, that I needed to test the waters slowly, to watch actions instead of listening only to words. When I finally went out again, it was in daylight. Coffee first. I learned to ask questions. I learned to observe behavior over charm. I learned that the foundation of trust was consistency, not promises made over candlelight. Months later, I sat at a quiet cafe, journaling, sipping chai, feeling the warmth seep through my hands. Logan was a memory, a lesson etched into my heart. I wasn't bitter. I was cautious, wiser, awake. I realized that trust isn't given, it's earned. That a person's truth is revealed not in grand gestures, but in small, repeated actions. That self-respect is the boundary no one else should ever cross. I smiled, looking out the window at the city moving around me. Life was happening, messy, beautiful, real. I didn't need someone else's validation to feel grounded. I didn't need anyone's charm to define my worth. I had myself, steady, resilient, capable of learning from mistakes without being crushed by them. For the first time in years, I felt steady. I let the city's soft chaos remind me that tomorrow was another day, full of potential, and this time, in my own hands. Sometimes the people we hope for the most aren't the ones who can give us what we truly need. Life teaches us to value honesty, consistency, and respect over charm and promises. Protect your heart, trust your instincts, and remember, self-respect is the foundation for all meaningful relationships. I never thought I'd be back in the dating world. My last relationship had ended 6 months ago, and it had left a bruise deeper than I expected. Not just the heartbreak, but the quiet, lingering doubt that maybe I wasn't cut out for this whole meeting someone new thing. I spent weeks scrolling through dating apps, half-heartedly swiping, more out of boredom than hope. Then, one evening, Danielle's profile popped up. She had this calm, approachable energy even through a screen. Her photos weren't flashy, just natural smiles, a camera in hand, some shots of Portland parks, the Willamette River, and a coffee shop she clearly loved. Her bio mentioned she was an art curator and had a soft spot for photography. She wrote about her weekends being spent exploring tiny corners of the city and her obsession with thrift store finds. What really caught me, though, were her messages. Warm, self-deprecating, the kind that made me laugh quietly at 2 a.m. We messaged for a few weeks before I felt brave enough to suggest meeting in person. I suggested Linden Park, a neutral spot with trails, a small lake, and always enough light and people to feel safe. She agreed. The night before the date, I barely slept. I rehearsed small talk, tried to imagine who she really was, and nervously checked the weather. Portland's fall was already setting in. Fog rolled in early, and evenings were chilly. I kept telling myself, it's just a walk, just a park, just coffee afterward if it goes well. When I finally arrived, she was already there. Danielle leaned against a lamppost, camera slung across her shoulder. Her smile was easy, not the kind that felt practiced, but genuine. "You're early," she said. "I didn't want to be late," I muttered. Awkward but relieved she seemed so approachable. We started walking, chatting about photography, favorite authors, little childhood adventures. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the park. I felt light, almost like I hadn't in months. There was a rhythm to our conversation, a give and take that made me forget the nervous tension in my chest. I didn't know it then, but the evening was about to test more than my nerves. We looped back toward the parking lot, laughing about a childhood dare involving mud puddles and a fallen kite. Then I saw him, a figure emerging from behind a row of bushes. My stomach dropped instantly. He was moving quickly, his hand partially concealed. Danielle's eyes widened slightly, just enough that I noticed. "Stay calm," she whispered. "Just keep walking slowly." The man stepped into our path, voice low and threatening. Wallets, phones, everything. Time froze. I couldn't move, couldn't think. But Danielle's reaction was immediate. Without hesitation, she kicked at the man's shins. He stumbled and she pushed him just enough to create space. I snapped out of it, grabbed her hand, and we ran toward the parking lot. Danielle shouted, "Call the police! Call the police!" while I fumbled for my phone. He yelled after us, frustrated, but the fog swallowed him quickly, and we reached the car without being caught. We dialed 911, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely press the buttons. The dispatcher's calm voice was like an anchor, grounding me in the chaos. I realized, sitting there with Danielle, that despite the terror, I felt something unexpected. Admiration, respect, and a strange, nervous thrill that came from seeing someone handle fear so gracefully. We sat in the car afterward, catching our breath. The adrenaline was still surging, and the silence was heavy but comfortable. I looked at her and realized I had never felt this kind of connection on a first date. Not a spark or attraction in the usual sense, but a bond forged in fear and trust. I don't know how you did that," I said finally. "You were amazing." Danielle smiled nervously, brushing damp hair from her face. "Let's just say, adrenaline makes me braver than I usually am." We laughed, and for a moment the tension lifted. The city lights reflected in the fog, and the park behind us seemed quiet and ordinary again. I realized that fear could connect people in ways no ordinary date ever could. That night, I wasn't just impressed by Danielle's bravery. I felt seen, grounded, and oddly protective. Weeks passed. The police told us there was no record for our attacker, and we were advised to stay alert. Despite that, Danielle and I started meeting more often, walking through familiar streets, sharing coffee, talking about mundane things and big dreams alike. We explored Portland's nooks, the bookstore tucked behind a cafe, the mural alley by the old warehouse district, the park when fog rolled in, casting everything in a soft, eerie light. Each adventure made me feel closer to her, like the danger that had bonded us hadn't faded but transformed into trust. We shared meals, stories, and moments that weren't about fear, yet always carried that invisible thread of shared experience. I realized the first date had been a crucible, revealing courage, instincts, and connection in a way no quiet cafe ever could. Months later, we hung a photo Danielle had taken of the fog-covered park on her apartment wall. I whispered to myself, remembering that Saturday evening. It was strange how danger, fear, and a sudden, uncontrollable adrenaline rush could turn into trust, laughter, and something undeniably intimate. That night, I realized something important. Dating isn't just about chemistry, shared interests, or witty banter. It's about witnessing someone's instinct, resilience, and character when the world suddenly turns threatening. It's about seeing someone act with courage when fear is real. Danielle had done that, and I had seen it. Not as a story, not as a screen memory, but in real life, with my own eyes. We grew closer, cautiously at first, then confidently, navigating both life and small moments together. The foggy park remained a memory, a reminder that fear can test us, and in surviving, it can create unexpected bonds. Courage and trust are forged in shared adversity. Life may place fear in our path, but facing it together can deepen relationships and reveal the strength within us, often in ways ordinary moments never could. I didn't realize how starved I was for something real until the week of back-to-back meetings ended. My calendar had been a blur of client calls, PowerPoint decks, and Zoom links. By Friday, my brain felt like it had been run through a meat grinder. I wanted human interaction that didn't revolve around deadlines or quarterly reports. I wanted laughter. I wanted conversation. Not the polite nods of coworkers half asleep on another call. Not the canned small talk with people I'd never see outside work. And then Clara Bennett appeared. Or at least her profile did. Warm smile. Love for hiking. A sarcastic sense of humor that made the one-liners in her bio feel alive. I swiped right, almost on impulse, and within hours we were messaging. It was lighthearted at first. Jokes about bad coffee, the latest overhyped Netflix series, and the misery of assembling IKEA furniture. Something about her tone felt real. Not curated, not filtered. I laughed more than I had all week and it felt nice. Then came the message that froze me. "Hey, I'm staying at the Westwood Hotel nearby. Come up, let's have a drink." I stared at the screen. Too fast, too forward. My gut shouted, "No." I typed carefully, "Thanks, but I'd rather meet somewhere public first." Then I blocked her account, hoping that would be the end of it. An hour later, a ping, another account, another message. "Don't be shy. Just one drink, I promise." My chest tightened. I laughed nervously. Must be some prank, right? Someone at work? The IT guy with too much free time? I created a fake account to video call her, just to figure out who was behind it. The screen lit up. Her face. Alive. Smiling in the Westwood Hotel lobby. The same lobby she'd said she was in. She waved, oblivious to the horror washing over me. "Ethan, didn't think you'd check." My fingers froze on the mouse. This wasn't funny. I ended the call immediately, deleted my accounts, and told myself I'd move on. But the feeling, the pit in my stomach, lingered. I couldn't shake it. Not completely. 2 months later, I thought I was safe. I'd avoided dating apps entirely, kept my routines tight, and learned to distrust sudden invitations. Then, while grabbing a morning coffee near my apartment, I felt it. The subtle pull of recognition. A woman at the next table. Her hair, the way she adjusted her jacket. The laugh that leaked out when she spoke to the barista. It was her. Clara. My stomach dropped. She looked up, caught my eye, and sent a subtle wave, a flicker of that same mischievous smile. Then she disappeared into the drizzle outside, like a ghost leaving behind the scent of fear. My hands trembled as I clutched my cup. I wasn't paranoid. I knew she had been stalking me. All those messages, the hotel appearances, it wasn't chance. Her obsession had stretched far beyond the screen. That night I double-checked every lock, pulled every blind tight, walked my apartment perimeter, noting every shadow. Every knock at the door made me tense. Every footstep in the hall sent a spike of adrenaline through my chest. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe I'd been wrong. But deep down, I knew the truth. Some people don't stop. Some people fixate, relentless. I switched cafes, changed walking routes, and when I cautiously returned to dating apps weeks later, it was under strict rules. Verification, video calls, background checks. Nothing casual, Nothing impulsive. Trust, but verify. I'd learned it the hard way. Weeks passed. I thought the worst was behind me. My life returned to some semblance of normal. Then, on a Thursday evening, I was leaving my apartment when I saw her across the street. Umbrella open, head down, following a path eerily similar to mine. Panic rose, sharp and immediate. I ducked into a side street, changed direction, quickened my pace. Every rational part of me screamed, "It's just coincidence. She can't possibly." But the pit in my stomach refused to listen. I made it home, double-locked the door and sat in the dark, listening. The hum of traffic, the quiet buzz of the refrigerator, normal sounds but each one tainted by the memory of her face. The next day I debated calling the police. But what would I say? A woman I met online keeps appearing near me? It sounded insane. They'd tell me to change routines. That's all. And yet, even now, after changing routines, I felt hunted. I felt exposed. It was an important lesson, though. Some people's charm masks obsession. Some smiles hide danger. And the world doesn't always warn you in advance. You recognize it only when you've felt it brushing against you. Months later, I finally felt a measure of safety. I changed apartments, moved farther from my old routines, avoided places I had once frequented, new cafes, new jogging routes, new patterns. I returned to dating apps only after vetting every profile, every photo, every message. I wasn't anxious anymore, not fully. I was careful. I had boundaries, rules, no fast invitations, public first, video calls mandatory. And yet sometimes I still thought about her. That unsettling mix of charm, confidence, and single-minded persistence. I'd shake my head and whisper to myself, trust but verify. Always verify. I started to meet people slowly. Coffee first, daylight, short conversations, observing actions over words. It wasn't thrilling, it wasn't intoxicating, but it was safe. And sometimes that's more important than excitement. By the time I started dating seriously again, I had rebuilt a sense of trust in myself. Not in everyone else, not in some instant attraction, but in my instincts. My caution wasn't cynicism, it was self-respect. Some people never stop. Some obsessions don't fade with distance. And the safest way forward is vigilance, preparedness, and prioritizing your own well-being above any fleeting connection. I carry the lesson with me daily. New faces, new apps, new conversations. I test reality before I invest hope. I value honesty and consistency above charm. I have boundaries. I have rules. Occasionally, when I sip coffee in a quiet cafe and glance out the window, I remind myself that I survived something that could have gone badly, that I learned the hard way that not everyone is safe, and sometimes self-preservation is the bravest act of all. Charm and persistence can be deceptive. The world is full of people whose intentions aren't always clear, and not everyone respects boundaries. The most important lessons in modern relationships are vigilance, verification, and trusting your instincts. Protect your space, value your safety, and never let excitement override judgment. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who leaned on dating apps to meet someone. After a string of bad relationships and awkward encounters, I was more comfortable with the familiar routines of my life. Late-night study sessions, weekend brunches with my sister, and binge-watching shows that didn't require social interaction. But loneliness has a funny way of creeping in, subtle and persistent, like fog rolling over the bay. I first matched with Logan Pierce on a quiet Thursday evening, a week before our actual date. His profile picture was relaxed. No fake smiles, just him standing in a kitchen with a messy apron and a wide grin. The caption read, "I burn water, but I promise my company is better than my cooking." I laughed at that, imagining the disaster that could be, and decided to swipe right. The next few weeks were a blend of light-hearted messages and slow flirting. He asked about my favorite childhood meals and shared pictures of the spaghetti sauce he made that night. I shared the secret recipe my grandmother had passed down, though in reality I barely followed it correctly. The conversation never hit those awkward pauses I had come to expect with new people. I felt comfortable, which scared me more than it thrilled me. By the time Friday night arrived, I was jittery. I had dressed in a navy blue dress that fell just above my knees, paired with simple flats. My hair, usually a curly mess, had been tamed into loose waves. I checked the mirror repeatedly, unsure if I looked confident or ridiculous. La Vida was small, but bustling. The scent of garlic and fresh bread mingled with the faint hum of jazz. I spotted Logan immediately. He waved, smiling nervously, and my heart gave a small leap. "You look great," he said, pulling out my chair. "Thanks," I replied, smiling back, trying to ease the tension coiling in my stomach. Traffic was insane, I almost didn't make it. We started with casual conversation, kitchen disasters, family trips, and our shared love of street art. The conversation flowed easily, laughter punctuating our stories. I felt that rare thrill, the kind where time seems to bend and the world outside the restaurant fades away. And then she appeared. At first, I didn't register her. A woman with sharp eyes, a tense posture, and an aura of barely contained anger approached our table. "Logan, we need to talk," she snapped, her voice cutting through the restaurant's chatter. I froze. "Oh, I didn't know. You were warned," she said, voice low but steady, eyes locking onto mine. "I told you this would happen." Before I could even process it, a glass of water tipped over, splashing across the table and soaking my purse. I grabbed a napkin frantically, trying to stop the mess. Logan muttered something, hands raised in a mix of guilt and fear, but Gilda's fury didn't abate. In an instant, she lunged. I stumbled back, narrowly avoiding the scalding tea on the counter. The room seemed to spin. Chairs scraped the floor as I grabbed one to shield myself. "Stay away," I shouted, voice trembling. The staff intervened quickly, stepping between us. Patrons gasped and whispered, some calling 911. The tension crackled, sharp and suffocating. Gilda, realizing she was surrounded, finally retreated. I sank into my chair, shaking, heart hammering in my chest. Logan looked pale, guilt etched across his face. I didn't think she'd find out tonight," he muttered. I didn't answer. My instincts screamed at me. The safest place wasn't here. I grabbed my coat and slipped into the night, each breath of crisp San Francisco air grounding me as distant sirens signaled help was on the way. By the time I reached my sister's apartment, I realized something. I had survived the chaos. I had faced fear and confrontation and come out intact. My boundaries were more important than anyone else's drama, and I had discovered a kind of quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. That night, I lay awake, thinking about Logan, about Gilda, about how easily charm can disguise danger, and I whispered to myself, next time, I pick the place, and I pick the company. The days after that night were a blur. I deleted my dating apps and avoided Logan's messages, not out of pettiness, but out of self-preservation. Every alert on my phone made my stomach twist, a memory of that chaotic evening rushing back. My sister Maya noticed the change immediately. She plopped next to me on the couch one Sunday afternoon, coffee in hand, and studied me like a detective. "You look like you've been through a tornado," she said, half laughing. "I kind of have," I admitted. I recounted the date, the confrontation, and how I'd fled. Her eyebrows knit together, worry etched on her face. "Shelley, you need to be careful," she said, voice softening. "People can be charming, but charm doesn't erase lies. You did the right thing leaving." I nodded, comforted by her words, but still rattled. The incident had left a crack in my trust. Every new person I met seemed suspect, every compliment a potential trap. I had always considered myself cautious, but this had felt like a violation, like my intuition had been right all along. Weeks passed. I went back to my routines, burying myself in work and old hobbies. Yet Logan's messages kept arriving, persistent and pleading, claiming remorse. I read one, then deleted it. unsure if I wanted closure or if reading it would reopen the wound. It wasn't just Logan. The idea of trust itself had fractured. Friends noticed my quietness at gatherings, my hesitations when meeting someone new. One evening, my coworker, Jenna, nudged me. "You're avoiding someone, aren't you?" she asked casually. I hesitated, unsure whether to explain. "I had a bad experience," I admitted. She nodded knowingly. "Dating's tricky. You're allowed to take your time." It was a relief to hear. I realized that survival wasn't just physical. Emotional survival, preserving my sense of safety and boundaries, was just as vital. That night I journaled for hours, trying to untangle my fear from my anger, my guilt from my relief. It was in that quiet writing that I began to understand something crucial. I didn't need to forgive Logan, and I didn't owe him a second chance. What mattered was me, my choices, my sense of security. The memory of that chaotic evening, once paralyzing, was becoming a lesson in resilience. Slowly, I began putting myself back out into the world, but carefully, intentionally. I stopped relying on dating apps and instead focused on real-life connections, friends of friends, colleagues, and social hobbies. I signed up for a cooking class, ironically enough, wanting to reclaim the joy that Logan had turned into fear. The class was small, a mix of amateurs and semi-professionals, but it was therapeutic. Chopping, stirring, and tasting grounded me. For the first time in weeks, I felt normal again. I laughed freely when someone dropped pasta sauce on the floor, when jokes about culinary disasters flew across the room. I realized that trust wasn't a binary. It wasn't that everyone was dangerous or safe. It was about learning to navigate risk and listen to my instincts. One evening after class, a fellow student, Max, walked me home. Conversation flowed naturally, lighthearted and unforced. Unlike Logan, he respected my pace, never pressing for more than I was willing to give. I realized that trust could be rebuilt, slowly, with the right people. Months later, I was walking downtown when I saw Logan in the distance. My first instinct was panic, but I paused. He looked older somehow, wearier, perhaps humbled. I didn't approach him, didn't engage, but I noticed the difference. I wasn't scared. Not anymore. That night, I reflected on how far I had come. The chaos of that first date, the confrontation, the fleeing through the streets. It had all been terrifying, but it had also taught me something invaluable. I was capable of standing my ground, of making decisions in the face of fear, of preserving myself. By the following spring, I had moved into my own apartment, a space I could fully control. Candles lined the windowsills. Soft music played in the background, and I finally felt at peace. I still remembered that night at La Vida, but it no longer held me hostage. I knew now that charm and sweet words could mask danger. Boundaries were essential. Trust was precious, to be earned carefully. And above all, survival isn't just about running from harm. It's about recognizing it and protecting yourself before it escalates. I whispered to myself as I lit another candle, the soft flicker warming the room. Next time I pick the place, and I pick the company. Because I had learned that the strongest love and respect one could offer isn't for someone else. It's for oneself. Life can present charm and allure that hide danger, but trusting your instincts, setting boundaries, and prioritizing your safety are acts of strength, not weakness. Survival and growth come from knowing your worth and refusing to compromise it. I hadn't intended to be back on a dating app. After a 6-year relationship that ended more with exhaustion than heartbreak, I swore off swiping for strangers. But loneliness has a subtle way of sneaking in under the guise of new beginnings. My best friend Jenna kept nudging me. "Just try it," she said. "You might be surprised." I downloaded the app one Sunday evening, half-hearted, and spent 30 minutes scrolling through profiles. Half the faces blurred into the same filtered smiles, the same carefully curated poses. Then I saw him. Ethan Parker, 30, a barista and amateur photographer who claimed he could make the best cappuccino in Texas. His photos weren't overdone, just natural, and his bio made me laugh. Professional overthinker, part-time pizza enthusiast. I swiped right on impulse, more for curiosity than hope. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. Ethan had swiped right on me too. A week of messaging began with light jokes about latte art fails, favorite music, and hiking trails. There was a rhythm to our conversation that felt effortless. Then came Friday, the day we decided to meet. I dressed carefully, choosing a casual dress I felt confident in and sneakers for comfort. The rooftop bar he suggested was downtown, a quiet spot with fairy lights and a view of the city skyline. My stomach fluttered in anticipation. I arrived first, ordered a drink, and picked a table near the edge so I could see the whole bar. Ethan appeared 20 minutes later carrying a bouquet of daisies, an oddly sweet touch. "Hey, you're even better in person," he said, voice easy, a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I felt a blush creep across my cheeks. "Thanks. You're not so bad yourself," I replied, tucking my hair behind my ear. We laughed, exchanged stories about ridiculous jobs we'd had, and shared a few small secrets. I was surprised at how comfortable I felt. But as the night went on, little things began to nag at me. He reached across the table a bit too eagerly when I mentioned my drink. "I can hold that for you," he said, grabbing my hand lightly. I pulled back subtly. He smiled, but his eyes lingered, and a small prick of unease crept into my chest. I brushed it off, telling myself I was imagining things. Ethan suggested moving to a quieter spot on the rooftop closer to the edge where fewer people were sitting. "It'll be more private. I don't like crowds," he said, almost pleading. I hesitated. My gut screamed caution, but the night had been so easy so far. We slid into the secluded corner and the view of the city lights distracted me for a moment. The conversation continued, but a subtle tension hovered. Ethan's questions shifted from casual to pointed. "Where do you live exactly? Who else knows you're out tonight?" I felt my stomach tighten. "I don't usually share that info right away," I said cautiously, trying to keep the tone light. He laughed, but it was sharp. "Fair enough. Just seems, I don't know, distant." His hand brushed mine again, lingering this time. I withdrew slowly. "I like keeping some things private," I said firmly. The rest of the night felt off. Ethan made small comments about my outfit and the way I held my drink that weren't flattering, like he was testing my reactions. I laughed nervously, hoping to smooth over my rising anxiety. When he insisted I try a drink he recommended, I politely declined. His smile flickered, a shadow crossing his face. On the way out, he suggested grabbing a ride to another bar that was even more intimate. I felt panic crawl up my spine. "Actually, I think I'll call it a night," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart raced. Ethan hesitated, his tone shifting. "Come on, don't go yet, we're just getting started." I shook my head. "No, really. I'm fine here." He didn't push physically, but the insistence in his tone left me uneasy. I left with a tight grip on my keys, my phone clutched like a lifeline. Walking through the streets of Austin, I realized how quickly charm could be a mask and how important it was to listen to that inner voice screaming caution. A week later, Ethan messaged, apologetic, claiming he just got caught up in the moment. I debated replying, but curiosity got the better of me. We exchanged casual texts, nothing heavy, nothing personal. Then came subtle nudges. "You should come out tonight. I just got a table at this place, you'd love it." Each time my intuition screamed no. But each text made me anxious. What if I overreacted? What if I was just being paranoid? One Thursday, he sent a message. "I feel like we have a connection. Don't shut me out. I really like you." I stared at the screen, heart hammering. It was flattering, but my skin crawled. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I sent, "I think we should slow things down. I'm not comfortable moving this fast." Ethan's reply came almost immediately. "Are you saying you don't trust me? I'd never hurt you. Why are you being so distant?" I felt a rush of heat. I hadn't said anything about trust, just a desire for boundaries. But his reaction made me second-guess everything. I put my phone down, breathing deeply, and reminded myself that discomfort is a